Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, August 8th, and I'm your host, Natan Solomon. Today we bring you some incredible interviews from our wonderful hosts, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start by bringing you our Techstrong news recap to catch you up on the tech headlines from the weekend. Then, Alan Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, August 8th, and I'm your host, Natan Solomon. Today we bring you some incredible interviews from our wonderful hosts, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start by bringing you our Techstrong news recap to catch you up on the tech headlines from the weekend. Then, Alan spoke with Shania Levin, who is the CEO and co-founder of CodeC. In this interview, Alan and Shania speak about CodeC, which is a developer platform that helps developers master the understanding of code bases. Next, Alan sat down with Thomas Donnelly, the CIO of BetterCloud, to discuss how zero-touch IT can be critical to an organization's future. Alan then speaks with Marcus Merrill, who is the VP of Technology Strategies at Sauce Labs. In this discussion, Marcus and Alan talk about the Every Experience Matters report, which explores how user experience impacts brand loyalty, accessibility, and revenue. We then bring you to RSA, where Charlene sat down with the CEO of Venafi, Jeff Hudson. The two talk about machine identity management, digital transformation, and Venafi's open source project, so be sure to check that out. Next, we have episode 8 of Techstrong Women. In this episode, Charlene welcomes Rebecca Krauthamer, who is the founder and chief product officer at QSecure. Charlene and Rebecca discuss how organizations can encourage, promote, and normalize women and girls in STEM programs and STEM careers. After that episode, Cody Brown joins us to talk about some of our upcoming webinars. Then, we bring you to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Mitch met up with Raziel Tabib, who is the CEO of CodeFresh. Raziel and Mitch spoke about GitOps adoption and the Argo project, which is a CNCF project for building and managing continuous delivery workflows on Kubernetes. Next, we have our usual 1-2 punch of View with Vizard. In the first, Mike spoke with Perk Stozek, the engineering manager for open source collection at Sumo Logic, about the state of the Open Telemetry project. In the second, Mike interviews the CEO of ChainGuard, Dan Lawrence, about the Log4j shell vulnerability report from the Cyber Safety Review Board. We wrap up the show with 2 more interviews with Alan. First, at RSA, Alan met with Ian Hutchinson, who is the head of sales at Duplo Cloud. The two talk about Duplo Cloud's low-code, no-code approach that ensures security and compliance, so be sure to tune in to learn more. Finally, at KubeCon Cloud Native Con, Alan met with Uma Mukara, head of chaos engineering at Harness, to discuss Litmus Chaos, a CNCF open source platform for developers and SREs to practice chaos engineering. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 8th. First in news, a bipartisan proposal was presented to Congress which would hand regulatory authority over Bitcoin and Ether to the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. The move comes amidst scams, crashes, and overall uncertainty regarding cryptos. While many tech assets have plummeted recently, Bitcoin has taken quite the hit, going from $68,000 in November 2021 to $23,000 a coin this week. Other proposals sought to hand authority to the Securities and Exchange Commission. One major selling point of cryptocurrencies has been the lack of government oversight. However, with its growing instability, Congress is looking to step in. Next, Decentraland announced the world's first metaverse ATM. Decentraland is a VR platform powered by the Ethereum blockchain. With the platform, users can create, experience, and even monetize content and apps. Through partnerships with Transact Payment Gateway and Metaverse Architect Studio, users will be able to easily purchase Mana, a primarily used in-game currency, or any other cryptocurrency for that matter. With the introduction of this ATM, users will get an even more realistic experience. Interestingly, banks are also getting involved in the metaverse, with JP Morgan opening a metaverse lounge on Decentraland at the beginning of 2022. So we'll have to wait and see how banks continue to expand on this platform. In other news, Amazon has acquired the Roomba robot vacuum maker iRobot for $1.7 billion. iRobot has been designing robot vacuums since 2002 and has sold millions of its most popular product, Roomba. One of its most recent products, iRobot OS, is an AI-powered platform for its robot vacuums and mops. Using this AI, iRobot is separating Roomba from its competitors with enhanced software and expanded cleaning abilities, an addition which has piqued the interest of industry giant Amazon. Amazon hasn't clearly outlined its plans after the acquisition, but Amazon did recently launch its own smart home product, Astro Smart Home Robot, so it'll be interesting to see if it pulls off some software from the Roomba to enhance its launch. Next, Canadian power chip maker GaN Systems raised $150 million in a funding round led by Fidelity Management and Research. There's been a crippling chip shortage that has plagued almost every country, yet GaN claims to have secured production volume with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co. Companies like BMW and Toyota have been long-term investors in GaN, and the chipmaker recently signed its first capacity agreement with BMW, guaranteeing the delivery of power chips. These power chips hold tons of importance in the car industry, with about 100 of them being used in each vehicle. GaN uses gallium nitride, allowing it to achieve 4 times reduction in power loss compared to the silicon most other chip makers use. By securing $150 million in funding, GaN will look to expand its foothold on the chip industry, and it will continue to fill the needs of companies that depend on these chips. Next up, researchers at Yale developed technology to restore cell and organ functions in pigs after their death. In a new study, the researchers induced cardiac arrest in anesthetized pigs. Using a heart-lung machine alongside a new experimental fluid containing compounds that promote cellular health, the researchers found that multiple organ functions had been restored. While the use of this technology on humans is far off, the findings could eventually increase the availability of donor organs. On Security Boulevard, we have an article discussing why organizations need to focus on upskilling to close the cybersecurity skills gap. Cybersecurity is the #1 skills gap in 2022. However, due to barriers such as low bandwidth and tight budgets, there is a focus on hiring instead of upskilling. Upskilling, though, will likely be cheaper. The article also outlines 2 things organizations can do to upskill themselves. Find out more on Security Boulevard. On Container Journal, we have an article talking about the importance of Kubernetes in bank digitization. For many banks, digital applications that allow for mobile banking have become more important than the number of branches. Banks need to increase their use of cloud and containers to retain their customers. Kubernetes has become the de facto infrastructure technology for banks trying to save money and enhance developer productivity. For more insight into the many reasons why Kubernetes is essential in bank digitization, go to Container Journal. Finally, on DevOps.com, GitHub has released a set of tools for managing application development projects based on a spreadsheet called GitHub Projects. Many organizations have become dependent on software to drive digital processes to the point where managing all the ongoing projects has become a challenge. GitHub hopes that projects will be able to solve these issues by allowing teams to easily filter through issues and pull requests. With extensible project management platforms like GitHub Projects, workflows run less risk of becoming overly rigid. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone,
welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I'm really happy to have on as a guest for this segment Shania Levin. Shania is the co-founder CEO of CodeSee.io. That's CodeSee.io. Shania, welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me back.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, Shania, look, not everyone listening out here is going to be familiar with CodeSee.io. So I think we got to start there. Can you give us, our audience, maybe a little background on CodeSee.io, how you came to found and be CEO here, and let's hear the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in DevTools for about 10 years. I worked at Google and Docker and Cloudflare. And when I was working there on a number of different products, we basically had a bug 2 days before one of my big launches. A lot of obscenities were yelled 2 days before. And, all of a sudden I just kind of shouted out, why do we not understand our code? I was just really, really tired of trying to have these humongous code bases and only understanding a very, very small piece of them. So when something catastrophic happened, it was actually a catastrophe. And so out of that frustration of that kept keeping happening over and over and over, CodeSee was born. We are the first code visibility platform where we can help you detect, visualize, and automate all of your code understanding so that you can ship code faster without sacrificing quality. Essentially, we can take all of your code, visualize it. You can add any kind of information that you want, and that information follows you throughout your workflow so that you have the right information when you need it. Think about it as Google Maps for your code base.
Got it. I can't tell you how many founders I've met with whose companies are built on their own experiences, and usually, unfortunately, it's an experience like you described, their own kind of frustration with what's out there, saying there's got to be something better. And if there's not something better, I'm going to build it, God darn it. And you know what? And just go out and make a better mousetrap, a better solution. And that's a great story about it. I want our audience to understand. So really what we're doing here, Git recently celebrated, I forgot if it's its 15th or 25th birthday, I don't remember now, but it was some milestone birthday, right? And when Git was first kind of introduced, the idea of, a code repo, a repository where you put your code, and that you could share that code with your team, or with the public in the case of open source, with the community.
Right.
What a great concept that was.
Such an amazing concept. Yeah. It totally changed the game. Yeah.
Oh, instead of downloading the tarballs and trying to figure out what was there and then going through the code, and then if you wanted to make a change, uploading it, where do you upload it? I mean, having Git was amazing. But, the world has evolved a bit in these intervening years.
Yeah, absolutely.
A pure repository, just a repository is just a repository, right? We need more. And it seems to me that this is really what CodeSee is about. It's the next generation place, and I don't even want to call it Git, but it's the next generation place to store your code. But more than store your code, it's to visualize your code. Yeah. It's to actually see it in a sandbox, in practice, in I don't want to use the word production, but to see it in action.
Right.
So
we're trying to move. We all need to store our code somewhere. That's not going to change. But with the advent of open source, with the advent of microservices, with the advent of all of these things, we need to actually understand our code. We need to understand more of it at a time. And we need to be able to hop into any part and understand it quickly so that we can hop out of it. Code visibility is a kind of a new category, but there are a bunch of startups that are popping up to help with code visibility. Basically, code visibility for your application is exactly what observability is for production, right? But we're doing it in development, helping you to visualize and understand your code much earlier in the development cycle, so that hopefully a bunch of things that would be a problem won't make it to production. Observability absolutely has its place, and absolutely is incredibly valuable for just different problems. And so code visibility is this new era in not just storing your code, not just securing it, but understanding it in the first place.
I love it. Now, when we talk about the open source aspect of it, in my mind, there's really kind of two places where this applies. Number one is that the hub itself, is that open source so that people can spin up their own, if you will?
Yeah, so Open Source Hub is our community, and that in of itself is open source. The community and the website itself is open source. You can spin up your own. And this Open Source Hub that we created is really an extension of our mission, which is to master the understanding of code bases, right, including open source ones. And yeah, right. So like we are in a place where we absolutely, all of us, we've seen we need to understand our open source repos. It's vital that we get more people contributing to it. We get more people understanding how these open source code bases work. And the biggest barrier, yes, we can throw money at the problem that is 100% needed, but it really is breaking down the biggest barrier to entry, which is onboarding and understanding the open source project so that we can make meaningful contributions. And that's really what Open Source Hub is about.
Yep.
Is it just open source projects that are stored on Open Hub, or can we put really any software up there?
Well, it was targeted mainly for Open Source Hub, but I don't see why not. if your code says like,
because like
sort of that's one of the things you're seeing in a lot of the repos, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you guys are doing this now, but it could be a potential move down the road for you where you can have a private version of GitHub Enterprise or whatever, that may or may not even be hosted in the cloud. It could be hosted in a data center. And it's a repo for your own software that you don't share with anyone, right?
Yeah.
Other than your own team.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? But of course, look, I was in Austin, Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. 90% of applications today have open source in them. Over 90%. So when we talk about the power of open source today, I was on LinkedIn. Someone I know, I think a former Gartner guy. It's funny, when they leave Gartner, they get enlightened, right? And so he puts on LinkedIn, it's amazing to me how many security companies are running open source under the hood. Maybe it's amazing to you, but it's not exactly been a secret for a very long time.
Totally.
That so many of these tools actually run on open source, and it makes the world go around. So, something like this, of course, becomes very, very important.
Yeah.
Shania, I need you to let's give out some URLs, some information for people who maybe want to take a look at this.
For sure. Just opensourcehub.io. You can go upload your project there. We have a really engaged Discord community. We're almost 1,000 members any day now, and it's growing like crazy because people are really finding the connection. We've got one of the most engaged, kind of opinionated communities for open source contribution. And because we're really helping to solve this problem that other like issue aggregators don't, right? Good First Issue, all those are great to finding an issue. But when you're ready to make that contribution, you need to understand the code first. So that's really what Open Source Hub.io helps you to do.
Okay. And then the company website is Code C.
Yeah.
CODE.
Seeing code with your eyes.
Right.
That's right.
.io.
And why should people go there and not to Open Source Hub?
It really just depends on what you're looking for. Our company you can essentially use CodeC, the company. CodeC's product for free is embedded in your profile page on Open Source Hub. So you really can go anywhere on either property. But if you are a company or if you have more than 3 members for the community section, you can absolutely go to CodeC.io. We've got a lot of brilliant companies, kind of forward-thinking companies using our platform to visualize code throughout their whole workflow. And we're really trying to make sure that not only do you ship code faster, but you can also maintain it, right, in a quality way that doesn't sacrifice your speed. So all of that is not part of the Open Source Hub. But we've also got some really cool things up our sleeve for services coming very soon. So all of that is really, really exciting part of the company, but we also really, really need Open Source Hub for all of us.
Absolutely. And there's your invitation to come back and tell us about these exciting new services when they launch.
Will do. It's coming soon.
All right. Hey, Shania, thanks for coming on. Love what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much.
Again, it's opensourcehub.io.
That's right.
opensourcehub.io. It's a great new place to keep your project, to visualize. And again, it's not just keep your project. It's to work on your project, to visualize your project. Make sure you know what you got there and what that code is. Check it out. Shanae has been there. I mean, this was born of necessity from her own experiences, which are always the best ones. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. My guest for this segment is Tommy Donnelly, and Tommy, welcome.
Nice to have you on.
I'm glad to be here.
You know what? I didn't do your company and everything, but why don't you? We'll jump right into it. Why don't you give them kind of your company background, what you do there, and a little bit about BetterCloud. Go ahead.
Yeah, so BetterCloud was founded in 2011. We're headquartered out of New York City. Our goal is to transform and elevate the way that IT teams operate. We have kind of a best practice that we've been trying to evangelize throughout the IT community called Zero Touch IT, and our platform helps teams achieve that.
We're going to talk a lot about Zero Trust IT in just a moment, but in terms of BetterCloud, what's your kind of role at BetterCloud?
Yeah, so my role is the CIO. Mm-hmm. So I manage most of our technical teams. I also manage our security teams, and really, my goal was to come into the company and really figure out a way to elevate the way that IT operates. If you look at every single technology team, development teams, SRE teams, they've all kind of changed the way that they bring value to an organization, except for IT. And the reason that IT has not been able to do that is because the technology wasn't really there. Requests into IT are very ad hoc. You're dealing with people, but the technology is now to a place to where we can actually change the way that IT operates through zero-touch IT. And what this can actually do is change your organization to go from reactive to proactive to even strategic, for IT to really become a force multiplier for every single department in the organization.
I love this. Let's talk about the platform. It is zero touch, but when you say the platform, what exactly is on the platform? Does it work with like public cloud providers? Does it sit in front of that? What exactly does it, how does it work? Where does it sit?
Yeah, so basically where Better Cloud sits is what it's called as a SaaS management platform. And so we connect to all the APIs for all the different SaaS providers that you would buy. Salesforce, Workday, Zoom, all these different softwares that we are using, you can connect via API. And so what our platform does is it can automate IT tasks across multiple platforms at one time. And so to give you an example of what that means is, every employee coming into an organization has kind of a life cycle. They get their hardware. They then get onboarded into the company's systems. They basically make requests to the IT team for different resourcing. They change roles. They get a promotion, and then they get offboarded. And so what we do is we take this automation platform and we can actually automate all these things that an employee does within the organization. So what it really does is that, for an example would be onboarding. So you start at Better Cloud. When we're connected into ADP, when that switch flips and says, hey, you are actually a Better Cloud employee, we actually run API calls out. We actually send emails to hardware providers. You get your laptop, it gets provisioned. You don't have to touch anything. When you start your first day, that might trigger another workflow. And then we're provisioning you for all the applications. We're creating your emails. We're putting you into the distribution groups. We're loading software onto your computer through some other third-party platforms, but we're coordinating and orchestrating all that automation to where IT doesn't have to. And what that enables IT to do is think about bigger things, to interface and embed with the organization and solve problems using technology.
Love it. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And it's kind of SaaS ops, right? Because so many organizations, last interview I was doing with someone, we were talking about ransomware. And, I made the observation that companies like Techstrong Group here, right, us, get 99% of the IT, of the applications, of the technology we use, really are just SaaS apps, right? That we connect to and that we log on to, but we don't maintain the infrastructure. We don't, even things like the offsite backups, in terms of ransomware. We count on the SaaS providers doing that.
Exactly. And that's really the piece, is that shift to, people used to be kind of like, hey, we're cloud first, to really we're cloud only. That is kind of the secret sauce on why the technology is into a place to where we can actually connect to everything and coordinate actions and automations across the entire organization. And the benefits, it's critical for organizations now, especially with everybody moving to the remote workforce. People are working in, especially we're a medium-sized company, so we don't have 24-hour IT, but people work in different time zones. They're working out of Greece. They're working out of Israel. They're in Italy on vacation, but they're working. So the way people work is fundamentally changed. People are really shifting to non-linear work days where I want to check my email in the morning. I'm going to go skiing, and I'm going to then work from 2 to 6 p.m. and I might be in the French Alps, and my IT team's in New York. So when you automate all this stuff, when everything that IT does is automate, you can get help at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night when your IT team is asleep because you're in a completely different time zone. So it's really transformative for companies that are cloud only, that can, that operate in different time zones. It really enables a better employee experience for the end users.
Absolutely. Very cool. All right, let's get into, I almost said zero trust, right? Because that has been such a buzzword in the security.
That's a whole nother.
No, I was telling you, we were at RSA in early June, and man, I had zero trust coming out of my ears already. But let's talk about zero touch.
Sure.
IT and what you guys, what exactly is it, and how is it being implemented, and stuff like that?
Yeah, and so we basically, I can kind of go into how you would go upon embarking into a zero touch IT. So typically what we recommend is you find an automation platform that can plug into a SaaS management platform that can plug into all your software. And you really want to look for something that is low code, that you can have your entire team automating tasks on. And then what we recommend to people is say hey, carve out 5% of your IT time to identify the most common tickets that's burning your team's time. Let's carve out 5% and say 5% of our time is going to be spent automating IT tickets, to where IT does not have to touch those tickets, that things happen automatically. And then once you do that, that 5% creates more capacity. And that more capacity, that turns into 10%, and that turns into 20%, and that turns into, so essentially you'll go from, hey, I'm spending 5% of my time automating tickets to I'm spending 50% of my time. And so if you look at the impact that has on an organization like ours, we get roughly, 23,000 IT tickets in the first 6 months of the year.
Wow.
50% of those were completely automated, where our team is not actually touching those requests. And what that means is that you as an end user, you don't have to wait for IT. So, you're going to do something like, oh, I need this software. Well, if you can get that immediately, in the old days, you would kind of open up a ticket. You would then have somebody, you might have to wait for somebody to respond. You might have to get permission from somebody else. And then you provision, that software. But hey, if that's Friday night, you might be getting that software on Monday. So the employee experience is that you get everything immediately and you don't have to wait. At our organization, I count up all the hours of when a ticket was created and when we actually closed the ticket. And it's in the thousands and thousands of hours that people are waiting IT. And that means you have to kind of stop what you're doing, and then you have to do something else. And then once they get back to you, then you're like, I'm back on this task. That goes away, right? You get everything you need immediately. You can stay on task. Everyone knows that task switching is the productivity killer. So that's really the benefit to the organization.
I love it. Very cool. Think about that. 50% of your tickets automated.
Yeah, and it's only going higher. One really cool project that we recently embarked on is we have built a chat bot, and so now we're able to solve an even higher number of requests because people can talk to this chat bot, and this chat bot is talking back to BetterCloud and launching applications. So what this gives us the ability is, hey, not only are we kicking off things via APIs, when you switch a role, we automatically, kick off workflows, but you can actually go to the chatbot and say hey, I need access to the Atlanta office. It'll tell you what app you need to download, and it'll provision your keys to your phone so you can use your phone to get into the Atlanta office. And so that chatbot is quickly becoming the most productive IT person on our team.
I love it. I'm always the poor idiot that whenever I ask the chat box something, it's not not something the chatbot can handle, and it says, "Oh, we have to get you someone. Hold on," and they transfer me over to a live person. I think, yeah, it's just my luck. But what's been the customer feedback on this, Tommy?
It's transformative because, we always talk about IT traditionally has been reactive. You don't have a seat at the table, right? You're a lot of CIOs we see reporting as CFOs. We see CIOs kind of buried in the organization. They're not really brought into strategic conversations. And when you go out and you reach out and you start, asking people, well, what can we do better? People are like, hey, get me a new laptop. That's not strategic, at all. That's very highly reactive. And so we really help companies elevate themselves, CIOs elevate themselves, get into board meetings, get into planning. Because if you can move from reactive to being proactive, the experience is much greater. And if you're shedding off 50% of those tickets, then I have the time to talk with each department, understand how you're doing business, embedding with each department, so I can basically enable you with technology. Things that you would never come and think of to ask me, I can embed in and be kind of that trusted partner of every single department in the organization. And hey, if you're a salesperson and you're saying, hey, I'm trying to get 100,000 sales, I'm like, hey, have you seen this technology? This can get you to 150,000. What that does is the next time you go into planning, the next time you start thinking, what are our goals going to be for the year? You're going to say, Tommy, can you come in and meet with my team as we're planning? Because you're that type of partner, a strategic partner that's going to enable strategic results.
Agreed. Excellent. Tommy, you know what we haven't? We haven't even told people where to go to find out more about this. But I know it's Better Cloud, but is it bettercloud.com? What's the website?
Yeah, it's www.bettercloud.com. And there's a lot of information around how we're helping customers elevate IT. Definitely glad to do assessments on your organization and potentially see the impact that this could have with your organization. Definitely willing, I'm always willing to talk with people and help them kind of go through this journey of from reactive to strategic and helping, elevate your career within your organization. We have a lot of success stories about a lot of people who's really taken their careers to the next level. Using zero touch IT.
Love it. Hey man, Tommy, thanks for coming on. If you're out there, you got a lot of SaaS, as most of us do, running a lot of your IT tasks. Better Cloud's definitely something to look into. We've had some folks from Better Cloud on before. Zero touch IT. It's an appealing concept. Tommy, come back on and keep us posted soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right, man. Thomas Donnelly, CIO at Better Cloud here on Techstrong. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong segment here, Techstrong TV. Happy to be joined. He's a repeat. He's been on our show several times. His name's Marcus Merrill. Marcus is with our good friends at Sauce Labs, and we've got some exciting news coming out of Sauce Labs. Look, for many of you who are out here watching, you may have heard of Sauce Labs. A lot of people know they have a deep expertise, deep knowledge in selenium testing and stuff like that. Testing today, as Marcus is going to talk about, is really grown, the whole QA area. And Sauce is growing with it. And Marcus, I don't want to take away his thunder, but he's going to talk to us a little bit about this. Hey, Marcus, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Alan. It's great. Always great.
Great to have you on. And we should also mention, we pulled poor Marcus in off a family vacation in Las Vegas. So
Apologize.
It's 8:30 in the morning. Nobody's awake.
Exactly. Well, yeah, Vegas is quiet that time of day. But apologies and thanks for taking time out, Marcus. All right, so I kind of set the table for you. Have at it, my friend.
Cool. Well, first of all, I guess I should introduce myself for those who haven't seen before. I'm Marcus Merrill, a vice president of technology strategy here at Sauce Labs, which is a weird title. I'm not in engineering. I don't actually have a team. I'm an individual contributor. It's funny. But my job is to sort of appraise the Sauce Labs platform and then rely on my 20 years of quality assurance experience to sort of understand what the testers actually need from a company like us, from a vendor like us, and what are the gaps in the current offering that we have, and how can we fill those via either building a product, partnering with another company that already does it, or acquiring companies that can give us that kind of space. So as you probably know, over the past 2 years, we've acquired 4 different companies that are helping us build out what we're calling the mobile DevOps test toolchain, which is it's intended to be kind of an early to late shift left and right motion for being able to weave testing in throughout the software development lifecycle. So we used to be the company that offered Selenium and Appium testing for desktop and mobile testing, automated testing. Now we offer manual testing for desktop. We offer emulator simulator in terms of the infrastructure and being able to run a device farm without having to own all the devices and all that stuff. But then we also we've acquired a company that helps us to do app distribution as well as mobile open beta testing in the wild, so that you can actually correlate what you're seeing in the field with what you're seeing in our lab environment. We've also acquired a company that helps us do API testing, which allows you to basically feed an endpoint or a Swagger open API spec, and it will generate a set of test cases, test suites, for you to be able to have confidence that your APIs work. And that also comes with mocking, API endpoint mocking, as well as contract testing. So imagine now how many elements of the developer lifecycle are covered in a way that a single vendor can give you data and signal all across the lifecycle to tell you, here's where you may be missing something, here's where you may have gaps, here's where we believe you could enhance your testing and your quality by looking at other things within that we'd noticed. I think it's kind of a first of its kind in the industry. There's kind of no doubt to me that that's what it is, because when I was in QA, this is the kind of software I would have killed to have all tied together under one procurement process, one vendor, one area.
Yeah. And that has been.
You know what, Marcus? So I'm not a QA professional. You are. But for as long as I've been in tech, in 30 years, it always amazed me how many different facets, how many different kinds of testing one has to do to release software, right? Or to release quality software.
Yeah.
And there was no, almost by definition, you had multiple vendors that you had to, you were siloed out for the different kinds of tests with different vendors. And I mean, there was just no getting around it. I think the whole world would like to be able to have, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but one throat to choke when it comes to my testing vendors, right? Yeah. Because the other thing is moving through the testing process and having to prepare your app to work, to get tested with using this tool and get tested using that tool for this and test for that on this. It's so much easier if you had a true suite, if you will. Let me make sure I got the name of this right. So we're calling it Mobile DevOps Testing Platform?
Toolchain only because we still intended to be a loosely coupled pairing. If you want to bring your own, so we have application crash monitoring, crash reporting, but if you want to integrate with another product to feed that into your pipeline, then our platform should be able to support that just as well. If you have a different API testing product, if you have a different way of running Cypress tests, we want to be able to plug all that data in to our series. So we're calling it a tool chain instead of a platform, because you're not locked in on any given part of it.
Got it. And so it's still offering, people the choice. So it's I don't want to use the word open, because open has all kinds of connotation about code and everything.
Pluggable. Let's call it pluggable.
A pluggable tool chain. I love it. Now, and like you mentioned, you could use Sauce Lab solutions for a lot of the stops along this tool chain, or you could use third parties as well, and you guys partner with many of them to boot.
Yeah.
Right.
We have good partnerships with Eggplant and Tricentis and a lot of different companies that do, in some cases, even overlapping things where we might have a competitive place. But we are trying to partner with everyone because we believe we have something to offer all of these partners in order to be able to plug into our platform and get good signal out of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how does this, so let's say I'm a Sauce Lab user now, right? I've been doing mostly Selenium testing using Sauce Lab. How do I get on board the tool chain here, right? What's the migration process look like?
Well, I mean, my recommendation would be to find other people in your organization who are doing different kinds of testing from you and become, start talking to them about what are they into, or if they're working on a microservice migration from a monolith, or even just a microservice by itself, an API, then the tools for generating test suites out of a Swagger doc or an open API spec are right there in our user interface. You can go with a few clicks of the button and stop and go from doing Selenium test analysis to doing API testing right there. So it's built in. And I would say personally, I'm such a fan of API testing, and I always have been my entire career. I would start there because to me, that's where most of the business logic of the application happens. That's where you should really start in terms of, QA is about risk management. More and more every day, what we're seeing is that our customers are telling us that QA is about risk management, not about code coverage. So API is primarily where you do your risk management testing, whereas UI testing should be reserved for testing to make sure that the user interface was coded properly to handle the signals from the API, which means you should be essentially doing a little bit less UI testing than you do API testing, because API is where the business logic lives. And the thing about us making a move into this space as Sauce Labs is that previously, as a sort of Selenium Appium house, our only answer to you was to say, well, you should probably do more API testing, but hey, let's get you doing more Selenium testing for sure. And now it allows us to be consultative and what I guess you'd say prescriptive, to be able to say, we're going to now partner with you to figure out where your gaps in testing are all over, and not just tell you to do more of one thing because that happens to be how we make more money. So I love it personally as a tester because now I get to be fully honest and fully what I guess you'd say, just fully giving the right kind of advice to people on how they can. Not that I was being dishonest before. I didn't mean that, but yeah.
I get what you mean, Marcus. You're a good guy. You don't have to say it. But here's another thing about it, though, too, and this isn't a one-person tool chain. Right? This is for an organization's entire testing, or almost their entire testing needs and strategy. Right? This isn't just Marcus adopting it. This is the whole team using the tool chain, depending on what kind of testing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, also the developers. I mean, now developers are heavily involved in writing API tests. Developers are primarily the folks that are writing Cypress and Puppeteer, Playwright, Test Cafe tests. They're the ones who really enjoy writing sort of those, I guess you'd say, lighter weight, less black box kinds of testing that do give you signal, and which you should have, all along the way. We don't want to get caught up in the tyranny of, or we want to be able to offer these things, Selenium and Cypress and API testing. So yeah, it's more than QA. It's QA and developers, and even in some cases, product people. So yeah,
what
it's
about
important to pull everyone in.
What about security?
Security is
Marcus?
So it's interesting. Security. There's something that drew me to Sauce Labs when I was in QA, and I was in industry, and I was on my fourth time of rebuilding an architecture, test automation architecture. And when Sauce came calling, I thought it was sort of a unique opportunity to say, there's a whole bunch of people that are running millions, hundreds of millions of Selenium tests every single year on this platform. And shouldn't Sauce Labs have the ability to sort of, while you're doing a Selenium test, you've already pulled up the web page, you've already hit the URL, you've already logged into the site. Shouldn't we be able to sort of do some scanning right then? Like, shouldn't we be able to sort of take what you've given us in parallel and say, while we're in here, we're going to test your site for security, accessibility, and performance. And now we are doing 2 of the 3, but it happens to be the one that you mentioned that we're not doing quite yet. We're doing accessibility and performance alongside regular Selenium testing. You need to go through a couple of hoops to get it enabled, but it's literally a couple of lines of code in your framework. But security is one that we have prototyped, but not quite released, where we're trying to integrate the open source Zap proxy into our current desktop web scanning in order to be able to do security testing and give you a report alongside the testing that we're running. It's not released yet. It's not going to be ready to release maybe this year, but it's something that we're going to try to do. We are not going to become a security company. On the horizon. We're not going to become a security company. We're not going to become an accessibility company, but we are partnering with companies who can help guide us in. We integrate an open source tool to give you an early warning scan and tell you the big red flags. And then we have a partner for you to call to get consultation and auditing when it comes to the real work of getting security testing done.
I love it. Look, everything I'm hearing from you, Marcus, first of all, I like, right? I'm hearing good stuff, but I'm hearing that Source Labs, and so I'm doing DevOps.com since 2013, 2014. So it's 9 years. Everything I'm hearing is that, hey, Source Labs is growing to be a full-featured testing partner. Right? It truly isn't just Selenium. It's this whole tool chain. And yes, security is coming. We're not saying we're going to be the security testing company. We'll be partnering. But we're here to really we understand your testing needs and your testing requirements. And we're here to try to give you as a complete a solution set as we can, even though it may not all be source, IP, but we're going to partner with the right people and offer you what you need, which is a complete solution for testing, for QA.
Yeah, and one that offers, I guess you'd say, wisdom, not just, for years, every Selenium test that you'd run on any of these platforms would say green or red. Bye, here's the logs, here's whatever. What we're trying to do is pull actual actionable insights out of, if we see 300 tests fail and 85 of them fail because of the same stack trace, you should know that as a headline when you walk in the morning. You shouldn't have to do that research yourself. And that, just think about all the different kinds of insights we can give you based on the data that's already traversing our platform. That's what we're trying to do. Yes, like you said, we're trying to be a real partner. It's kind of a cliche to say that our customers are partners, but in this case, for me, it's legitimate. I go to my customer site. I feel like they are a peer of mine. I don't feel like I'm trying to sell them something.
Love it.
No.
So, Marcus, can I ask a hard question, though, for you? And I don't even know if you would know this because it's not really your wheelhouse. But for customers who want to use the mobile DevOps testing tool chain, how is it sold? What's this going to cost?
Oh my gosh. Sorry. You told me not to jump around. I just knocked my laptop.
It happens.
Right. I definitely don't have pricing. That's the kind of thing. We have an enterprise sales motion, and that's kind of how we operate. And I'm not honestly part of it. I'm still on the kind of the vision and put this thing together side. How it's sold is you generally, you contact someone at the company, and then we try to really go in and do discovery to find out what you actually need. And if you already have something that we would duplicate, we're not going to try to replace it. We're just going to try to work with it and make sure how we can figure out how to plug it in and all that stuff. And so we're going to, I think that the basic building blocks of a mobile DevOps test tool chain implementation would be API testing, then mobile automated and live manual testing via the real device cloud, which would be either public devices or private devices, depending on your needs. And then we would talk about app distribution, where a lot of dev teams have to deal with App Center and Test Flight and all these really difficult to use tools made by Google and Apple. We have our Test Fairy tool, which sort of combines all of that and makes it super easy to distribute your apps to a select few beta testers or to the public with an instrumented app that will allow you to report bugs easily back to the platform. And then you tie all of this signal together by releasing it with Backtrace, which is our crash error monitoring tool, which means that you're in production and you're seeing stack traces and you're correlating signals and indexing them and sending them back to the developers within minutes of release rather than having to wait for a Reddit post from some angry gamer, something like that. And so you're covered from API all the way through automated testing in the lab, all the way through beta testing in the real world, all the way through crash and error reporting in production. You've shifted left, you've shifted right, and you've tied all the feedback loops together with all this signal that we've got. That's the idea. Protected by the only testing industry that does have ISO 27001, 27701, and SOC 2 Type 2
right.
certification. Yeah, that's right. So we've got all the security compliances to mean that your data is safe.
I love it, Marcus. Hey, you know what? Sauce Labs, SAUCELABS.com.
That's right.
Right? All right, my friend.
That's right.
Hey, enjoy the rest of your vacation. I'm sorry to pull you out in the middle, but hopefully the family's still asleep. They didn't miss you. I hope to see you soon. I hope all else stays well. For now, though, go to Sauce Labs. Check out this new mobile DevOps testing tool chain. And Marcus, thanks very much. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong.com. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to Techstrong TV Live at RSA. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and I am just thrilled beyond belief to be here in San Francisco to be having the conversations that we're going to be having today with all folks in the IT sector. The energy here is low right now because we're just getting started, but I have a feeling by the end of the day we are all going to be buzzing. We've got a lot of great interviews on tap today and tomorrow and Thursday, so I certainly hope you can stick around for the entirety. We'll also be showing them on demand later on Techstrong TV. But for now, my first interview of the day is with Mr. Jeff Hudson, who is the CEO of Venafi. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. It's great to see you.
Charlene, it's great seeing you. And you said there's low energy today. There was walking in here, and then I sat down and you started talking. I go, whoa, where'd all this energy come from?
Well,
first thing
there
today?
we go. That's 2 cups of tea and a scone. So that's what you get, I guess.
2 cups of tea. It's a book, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, you guys are one of our sponsors over at the DevSecOps Days event. So tell me, actually, for those people who don't know Venafi, please tell us a little bit about your company and what you guys do.
Sure. So let me give you a little context. So there's 2 actors on a network, people and machines. Mm-hmm. And people identify themselves to machines using usernames and passwords and some biometrics. But then machines have to talk to one another to make all these transactions and great systems work. Mm-hmm. They got to talk to one each other, identify to one another. They don't use usernames and passwords. They use machine identities. And we spend about $10 billion a year managing human identities. We're just getting started managing machine identities. The number of machines is going through the roof. That's what DevSecOps is all about. Machines are software. Bad guys steal identities and use them in attacks. And so you know who Okta is, right? Mm-hmm. So think of us as Okta for machine identity.
Okay.
And we created this category called machine identity management. And you know what's really cool? Seriously, we created a category, and that doesn't happen very often.
That's pretty awesome. That's like a whole Wikipedia
it is,
in and of itself.
It is. And so 6 years ago, I met with Gartner, and I said, well, you know, all of our customers are talking about machine identities and machine identity management. And they laughed. And then I went down to the show floor yesterday at RSA and at DevOpsCon. There's like 10 or 12 different companies that are saying machine identities. Yeah. And so we actually really created the category because it's really, really important. People and machines are the two actors. And we have a vision of the world where humans and machines work together to make the human condition better. So we better trust those machines, and it starts with their identity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I've actually had conversations with a number of folks lately about machine identity management. And so obviously you hit something early on, and that's a really, really strong thing to think about, because especially with everything happening over the last 2 or 3 years with the pandemic, we've had a lot of cybersecurity incidents that have cropped up a lot because we haven't had a real kind of handle on machine identity. And to your point earlier, cyber threat actors, they're breaking into the network and they're assuming the identities and they're wreaking havoc. So where do you kind of see the space moving forward? I mean, obviously popularity, it's going to become even more popular, but where do you see, the majority of kind of movement in the space?
So, little factoid, 11 years ago, I joined the company. We were 17 people. We were like 5 customers, and we're doing a tiny amount of revenue. Fast forward today, we've got 600 customers, the world's biggest, most security conscious, digitally transformed customers in the world, 500 people worldwide, 3,200 customers that use our open source project that we'll talk about. And it's been really fun to watch things grow and go and change. But all digital transformation happened in the data center.
Yeah.
Remember? Do you remember? Do you remember servers? Do you remember what a server was?
I remember servers.
Do you remember
yes.
Linux?
Oh, yes.
And do you remember the monolithic apps that were built on those?
Yes.
That was all digital transformation up until about 5 years ago. And then this thing called the cloud shows up as a platform. And now what's happened is digital transformation is happening at cloud native speeds.
Right.
So all digital transformation now, all the new apps is happening in a modern way on the cloud. And it's really fascinating to watch it because software is eating the world. We used to laugh, right? Remember when Andreessen said that?
Yeah.
And I used to tease him about that a little bit, but it was software was eating the world. But now that was about 1,000 miles an hour. Now it's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so that's a big change. So we kind of created this category in the data center, server, Linux, et cetera. And we are now leading, we lead there, and now we're leading also in cloud native, which is different. It's Kubernetes. It's there. You can't find a server in the cloud. I mean, seriously, right? It starts with Kubernetes and then Istio and some of the things that do the cross cloud management.
Right.
And that's brand new. And so this is exciting. So this is where it's all going. And this is what we can talk about a little bit as we passed a milestone.
yesterday. Yeah. So let's kind of double back just a second. Do you see the cloud native space actually being kind of usurping, that traditional digital transformation, like to the point where it's completely obliterating the kind of the standard digital transformation? Are we past that point? Or are we still going to be doing, or is it going to be kind of?
It's all layers.
Okay. All right.
Seriously, the mainframe is still actually there. And a lot of the very large corporations is still there. And we build wrappers, we put layers on it. And if anybody tells me we're going to lift and shift and we're going to get rid of that, there's no business case to do it.
Right. Right.
So what you do is you wrap it, you leave it there, and then the new things, they make calls as they need to, but you're not going to go recreate some of the stuff that took years to recreate and get right.
And why would you?
They're right. There's no business value.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's talk about this open source project that you guys have.
Right.
Tell me what's the name of it?
It's called Cert Manager.
Okay.
And we're about 2 million downloads a day now.
That's
Last
amazing.
year we got 500 million downloads in 2021, which was amazing in and of itself.
Right.
And if we think about machines, software, machine identities, TLS certificates, SSH keys, API keys, so we're going down a few levels, those identity types.
Yep.
The one that gets used the most in Kubernetes clusters, and then some of the management capabilities are TLS certificates for getting into, getting out of, and moving across Kubernetes clusters.
Okay.
Cert Manager, we created Cert Manager to solve all the problems related to these kinds of machine identity types, TLS. Because you got to get them, you got to keep them current, you got to know where they are. because if they fail, big systems go down. Like 2 weeks ago in Germany, almost all the payment systems in Germany went down because a TLS certificate expired. And people couldn't buy groceries, they couldn't get gas. I mean, these are systems that we count on.
Yeah.
That these things are important. So we created the open source piece that everybody can download and is downloading and putting into the Kubernetes world. And that's our contribution to get developers to take care of a lot of stuff that they'd have to code themselves otherwise. And then what we do is we come in and hook it up to something that gives the organization visibility, consistency, and control, which you need for high levels of security and high levels of reliability.
And it seems like a technology that is, it's necessary today in today's cloud native world.
You need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Identity in machines does two things. It gives ability to authenticate and then to authorize. If you're a machine and I'm a machine, wouldn't that be fun? So, no. So
I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It'd be weird.
Yeah.
But there's a way we communicate, and you're going to, first of all, going to want to authenticate me. I recognize that. And I will then authorize this machine to access you or access data. And it turns out in identity is different. And most people say, well, it's just like any resource, but it's not, because it gives access. And so you need to have a life cycle. You need to authenticate, you need to use it for authorization, and then you have to have governance. So these are all very specific things you have to do around machine identity. So I'm always going to always authenticate you, so I know who you are before I give you access or authorize you to access. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I wonder how are the bad guys actually using TLS certificates to kind of break into systems, because it seems like that would be a point for them to be able to do so if they were.
Happens all the time. It's called the man in the middle attack. And so many times the world has been, let me ask you, have you ever gotten a message that said the certificate on this site is expired?
Yes.
Okay, of course you have. And you can click two buttons. One says, get more information. The other one says proceed anyway.
Yeah. I always get more information. I never proceed.
And then you proceed anyway?
No, actually, normally I don't. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yay, I've done something right. It's not even 9 o'clock yet.
You're unique. Most security professionals, when I ask in a big audience, raise your hand if you've ever clicked proceed anyway. Click. And one of the reasons is they're in a hurry.
Right, yeah.
So we're trained to say we get a message, and it's a warning message, says this may be an insecure site, proceed anyway. And so the bad guys count on that kind of behavior. So that's one, humans, right? The other one is machine to machine. If I can get a certificate and I can use it, it's a machine identity, and I can use it to access other machines. A beautiful example everybody remembers, and this really kicked off the success of our companies, was Stuxnet.
Oh, yeah, Stuxnet. Yeah.
Well, it used a code signing certificate, a machine identity type that it stole to get software to run in a place where it shouldn't have been running. And it happened to be the Iran nuclear processing facility, right? And then it escaped into the wild, but it had this trusted identity on it, so wherever it would land, it would run. And so companies, organizations have to be able to keep track of that stuff, make sure they don't get used.
Yeah.
And so then there's a lot of other attacks, but it's like somebody gets a certificate, somebody gets an SSH key, somebody gets an API key, and all bets are off, because you can't tell, are they good or are they bad?
Yeah, it's one of those areas, I think, that when we're talking about machine identities and machines talking to machines, sometimes I feel like we really do still need to have the humans involved, because we're kind of vetting, if you will, because sometimes the machines don't actually recognize if something is off. If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. So humans have a role here. Humans and machines have to work together to improve the human condition. And there are so many times when machines work autonomously. So we'll kick something off, and then we won't come back for 6 months, but those machines will be working away together and doing a lot of stuff. And so you can't just say everything that a machine does, there's a human behind it. That's a fallacy. And machines are becoming smarter and smarter, right? Stipulate that. They're becoming more and more autonomous. We will give them agendas and say, go find this stuff and then do this. And then we'll actually allow it to say, and if you find this, do that. If you find this and this and this, do that. And then it's autonomy. It's they look at a situation, they make an agenda, and then they act on it. Yes, always a human at some point back in the day pushed a button. But then after that, these things work on their own. Ransomware, for example, humans aren't involved with ransomware. Ransomware attacks happen where machines are doing the work. One of the reasons, humans are noisy. When you go and get into a network, there's all kinds of things that go on. But machines, thousands of machines, millions of machines, it's just machine noise. It's noise.
Yeah. Well, I get the feeling we could talk about this all day long because it really is a fascinating conversation, and there are so many nuances, especially with respect to, machines and autonomy. We got a long day ahead of us.
I know we do. We do. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service.
Wow.
Because you bring to the world information that's necessary for us to participate in the evolution of what's happening here.
Wow.
And do it mindfully, do it consciously, for God's sake. We just can't say, oh, technology will figure it out, or, oh, we don't have to think about that. We have to think about it. The ethics of AI, the ethics of ML.
Absolutely.
What are machines? What is our relationship to machines? And people are going to laugh at me just like Gartner laughed at me 6 years ago. But this is from our perch, we see it clearly. We all have to be aware of this.
Well, you're very kind to say that, but I do believe it's a very, very important topic. And as we become more comfortable with machines actually running things and becoming more autonomous, I think we need to take a closer eye and really stay on top of it.
To fly our planes, drive our cars.
Yeah.
Decide on our credit, all that autonomously.
Yeah. So, Jeff, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me this morning to have the conversation. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. We've got another interview coming up in a couple minutes, so please stay tuned. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV and welcome to Techstrong Women, which is our regular series dedicated to celebrating women in technology, and not just the fact that they're women in technology, but what they're actually doing in technology, and taking a look at their successes and their challenges, obviously, and how we together are rising up the collective profile of women in the technology space. Today, I have the pleasure, first of all, I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the host of Techstrong Women. My co-host, Tracy Bannon, unfortunately is not able to join us today, but we do wish her well, and hopefully she'll be with us on the next episode of Techstrong Women. But today, I have the distinct pleasure of having Rebecca. How do you pronounce your last name, Rebecca? I know I'm going to mess it up if I say it. Okay, great. So thank you very much for being here, Rebecca. You are the founder, chief product officer at Q-Secure. So tell me a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charlene. Really happy to be here. So Q-Secure, what we do is there's this coming threat that is quantum computing to all public key cryptography. So kind of cybersecurity as we know it is threatened in a very real way. And so what we do at Q-Secure is we provide solutions for enterprise and for government to protect data networks against this incoming threat. And we do it in a way that kind of makes this very necessary upgrade easy, accessible, and seamless. So yeah, that's what we do at Q-Secure.
That's pretty cool. So quantum computing.
Quantum computing. So yeah, what the heck is quantum computing, right? So the way that I always like to describe it, because if you've heard of quantum computing, you might have Googled it and seen an explanation about ones and zeros at the same time. But it's never really a satisfying explanation. So the way that I always love to explain it is, if you imagine that you're trying to solve a maze, and you enter into this maze and you can go right or left, right? And so you choose right, choose left. You hit another T, right or left again. Mm-hmm. And it's this iterative process. You've been in a corn maze or something. It's this iterative process, and hopefully ultimately you find your way through the maze. And it's the same with a classical computer. A classical computer is what you and I use, and it's what I'm on right now. So in the quantum world, that's a classical computer. So a classical computer thinks in kind of the same way that we do, right? It's trying to find a path through this maze. It enters, it hits its first T, and it can go right or left. Right, next T, right or left. And it's, even if you run it in parallel, it's this kind of iterative process where you ultimately find a path out. Now, in a quantum realm, what this 1 and 0 at the same time means is a quantum computer enters a maze, and it hits its first T, and it can go right and left at the same time. And once again, right and left at the same time, and again, and again, and again. And that's really the power of the way that a quantum computer thinks. And it can look at all these possible combinations and all these possible different paths through a maze. And, you can extend a maze out to different kinds of AI problems or traveling salesman problems, these different things. And the cleverness of quantum algorithms means that you can chop off the wrong paths and instantly find the most optimal path through this maze. So that's really, really cool for a lot of areas. We can do some really revolutionary chemistry. We can do some really revolutionary things in AI. And of course, this, thanks to something called Shor's algorithm, this means that public key cryptography as we know it is toast. So that's quantum computing in a nutshell.
It's really fascinating to me to hear about quantum computing and the way that you've described it, because it seems so, like, I don't know, nebulous. It's like, it's really kind of hard to kind of pin down exactly what quantum computing is, unless it's like one of those things like, I don't know what it is, but I know what it is. I'll know it when I see it. But it's not a field that, you just don't hear too much about these days. So what was it about quantum computing that drew you to it?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I studied kind of in the AI field. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is the ethical side of technology. So I worked in AI for a while, and in part because it's becoming ubiquitous, right? We have technology at our fingertips all the time. So how do we kind of build things that help advance humanity and advance what we can do? And at a certain point in, I think, 2018, my current co-founder, Skip, we ended up kind of at an event together, and he started talking about quantum computing, and he'd just written a book about quantum computing. And I'd never heard of it before. Mm-hmm. And so I started to dive in, and it became really clear really quickly that this is the next generation. This is what's next for AI. This is what's next for technology. It's going to make so many things that we dream about in advanced tech possible. Mm-hmm. And it's such early days in quantum computing that the ability to be at the very forefront of it is incredibly exciting, and to be able to shape it in a positive direction. And of course, a huge piece of that is the cybersecurity piece. So how do we ensure that our data is protected going into the future? And it's not just because this quantum computing threat is coming down the pipe in the next several years, but it's also because data, the way that it's protected today, one sort of main thing that I guess one avenue of attack is data harvesting. Mm-hmm. And if you harvest data that's properly encrypted today, if that data has a shelf life, right? If that data is health records or bank account information or sensitive information, you want to make sure that that's protected in the future. So it needs to be properly encrypted and secured today to ensure that we retain our privacy, that we maintain the integrity of that really important data. So that's why getting ahead of it is very important.
Very, very cool. And I imagine you are probably one of the few females in the room, or even in the quantum computing space right now. I mean, it's certainly not something that kind of cropped up on my what do you want to be when you grow up? It was not one of the choices that was made available to me. So, how did you? It's like, how do you deal with that? I mean, it can be a difficult conversation sometimes, I'm sure.
It's so true. And back in school, the balance is really still not quite equal. So, you're 1 in 8 women in computer science, or my major was symbolic systems. And I think, that still translates into the working environment, especially when it comes to something like cybersecurity or quantum. Shout out to a lot of really awesome women who are in the quantum computing space. So we have an advisor, Sarah McCarty. She's like a world expert in post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. She's awesome. Jessica Pointing over at MIT, I believe. She's got, all the advanced degrees from all the incredibly top universities. Julie Love heading up operations at Microsoft and quantum. So a ton of really, really cool women. But yes, of course, when it comes to, who's kind of deep in this, it's primarily reflective of software engineering generally. It can be challenging walking into a room and often being the only woman in the room. And I think you have the extra expectations, and you'll sometimes get challenged in ways that you might not get challenged in if you're, if you weren't a woman, or if you looked more like everyone else in the room. So I think you have this pressure to really perform at or above what other people are expected to perform. And I would love to see more women. And I think one way, I love speaking out because I think women need to see more people that look like them in this space and get inspired. I think starting early too, like you were saying, when you're a kid, you want to be a fireman or firewoman. You want to be a astronaut or doctor. So I think having these role models really early on is incredibly important. And that sort of feeds into to something else you were saying, right? Quantum is this unintuitive field, and something that Jack Hittery of Sandbox, or formerly Google X Quantum, said is, if we can get quantum physics taught early, if we can get linear algebra, which is the math that's really important in this space, if we can get those taught before calculus and before plastic physics, if we can get it really early on and get people to start thinking in those terms, we could start, you could develop that intuition naturally, right? And I think it's the same for kind of thinking in these ways in the quantum space, and also the same for getting more of a gender balance in the future.
You hit on something there that kind of makes me think a little bit. When we're talking about just the whole STEM and STEAM movement in school these days, there's so much emphasis on getting females involved in science and technology and engineering and math. But I wonder if we actually might be kind of going about it in the wrong way. Maybe it's not about the gender. Maybe it's more about the curriculum. Maybe we need to start thinking about ways that, it doesn't really matter if it's a male or a female, but just getting the right information in front of the students early enough so that they can make the decisions. I think, and please tell me, because obviously I'm older, and so I'm probably a generation removed, but it seems like the conversations around technology and engineering and science and math in school these days is a lot less gender specific than it used to be. There are a lot more teachers who are now promoting basically equality, if you will, for lack of a better word, basically STEAM for all, STEAM for, it's not really just for, for males or for females. And please, like I said, tell me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like we are making some some progress in the educational system. Obviously, it's not half as where it really should be, but I think iteratively we are making some progress.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. It's, as opposed to a decade or two ago, even when I was in school, right? Mm-hmm. I think the getting to parity, promoting women and sort of non-typical people into STEM and STEAM is just at the forefront, which I think it wasn't before. And there's so many initiatives, and there's so much good happening. And hopefully we'll start to see those numbers sort of advancing from elementary to high school to college to the work world. I really do hope to see that. I think, it's funny. So when you're in the early days of a startup, right, you're not making money. You're kind of, you're putting it all in, you're putting it all on the table. So in my early days, several years ago, when we were starting out Q-Secure, I was tutoring for kind of on the side to support it. And I always remember these two students that I tutored, brother and sister. And they started out when they were 6 and 8 years old, I think. And so the girl was younger, 6 years old. And I was tutoring them in computer science. And the brother, and this is of course anecdotal, but I always felt like it was representative. The brother was, he jumped right in. He was not afraid to make mistakes and kind of just go for it. And he progressed really, really quickly. And the girl, the 6-year-old, I worked with them for a couple of years. And the 6-year-old, even though she was really young, and this wasn't that long ago, she was already nervous. You could tell that she already kind of had the message that computer science wasn't for her. And, it isn't for everyone, right? You might be more of a language person. You might be, everyone has a specific genius, and it's okay if it's not for you. But she had already kind of absorbed the message that it wasn't for girls, is what I took away from that. And, she was very afraid to make mistakes. She was very afraid to kind of put herself into it and look silly. And that, that was sad for me. And I tried to encourage her and kind of, motivate her by saying, I'm not going to check it off as right until you've made 3 mistakes or something like that. But, I think it does speak to how we do have to really get ahead of it early. And I think there's still some work to do in terms of we can promote, getting women and other diversity into STEM and STEAM. But sometimes that also gives the message that you are different. You as a woman are different. And it points out that you are different. So I think, just making it more and more normal and giving women a safe place to start to learn, especially early on, is, I think, something we have to work towards.
Gee, and here I thought we were doing so much better than we are.
We're doing amazing. I meet so many strong young women, and I didn't want to kind of poo-poo that, but yes, I think we're doing great, and we still have some work to do.
Well, I think, the people who I speak with, such as yourself, the women who do come on and especially the younger generation, they are strong. I mean, they are really, they epitomize tech strong women. They're smart as a whip. They're not afraid to step up and be that mouthpiece, if you will, for their gender. And they celebrate the fact that they are female. They're not trying to hide behind who they are as a gender, as a male or as a female, or trying to be more guy-like. They're, I am a female. I'm in this space. I recognize that, I may not be one of the many, but I'm proud of who I am and where I am. And I think that's amazing. And I think it would be just so much better if we could get all females who are interested in IT to really, really think that way. And whether that comes from the school, whether that comes from the home, whether that comes from your work environment, it's obvious that, to your point, there's still work that needs to be done. So we are on the right track. And, but I think it's so important that we really do, collectively lift each other up and get that message out that it is okay to be a female in IT. And whether that comes from, the home or school or, even in the workplace, it's always so very important to say those words and say it is, it's a great thing to be, a female in IT and be proud of it. Really, I mean, I think for so long that the whole IT kind of moniker was, I hate to say geeky, and people are like, I don't want to be considered a geek, and so I think that's why there were, a lot of females who were kind of shied away from being in the space because they didn't want to be labeled as such.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying. Just it brings to mind this, the chief data officer at Franklin Templeton. She's just like incredibly fashionable. And we talk a lot about this topic. And she's just kind of fabulously fashionable and walks into the room and she is deeply, deeply technical, and she's leading a deeply, deeply technical part of a Fortune 500 company. But it's very true. If we're trying to be, for so long, there has been this message that you got to kind of conform and be tough and all these different sort of masculine things. But if you're trying to be something you're not coming from a place of, as much power as you can be. So I think that's absolutely true. What we bring is all very unique, and the message that it's okay to be a woman, whatever that means, and bring your full self to work is totally true.
Yeah. And the whole education aspect as well, I think goes well beyond just school. And it really should, I think, move more into the workplace. And we've talked on Techstrong Women in the past about the importance of mentorship and having the right mentors and having that, the right conversations about being a female in IT and or just being a strong woman in general. But and your mentor doesn't even have to be another female. It's just really somebody who you can look up to, and you can kind of use as a sounding board here and there, and get get honest opinions and get honest learnings from as well. And I'm a strong believer in mentorship programs, and wondering if you guys are, if your company is, or if you personally are involved in any sort of mentorship efforts, whether it's in the office with the Boys and Girls Club or whatever, what are you doing as far as, the kind of like paying it forward, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Hugely, hugely important. Completely agree. I've had mentors, both men and women, who have lifted me up and taught me so many things about, that I belong and kind of how to go forward as a strong woman in business. And I love mentoring. I do a lot of talks and a lot of education initiatives, and take on a lot of interns as well. So, as we're talking, I'm thinking about a current intern I have. She's a Stanford student, and we talk about a lot of this stuff pretty frequently. And I think getting these messages, I have and do currently benefit so much from the mentorship that I receive, and I love to pay it forward in any way that I can.
That's great. So I want to kind of turn the conversation a little bit to how you label yourself. You call yourself a technology ethicist. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is that? What do you mean by that? Because, it's not something that just kind of rolls right off the tongue.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Going back to what we were talking about before, technology is everywhere. You and I are on computers right now. We've got phones, probably, I've got mine right here. And I studied AI, and it brings up a lot of these big questions of, well, you got to think about psychology and cognitive science, and what is a thinking thing? What's a human being, right? And you got to, in order to translate that into thinking about how you build machine learning, artificial intelligence. And a lot of those classes really got to me in a deep way. And so if technology is so, ubiquitous, if it's part of our lives, I think it's so incredibly important to be thinking about how to build it and direct it in a way that is going to augment us, that's going to kind of enhance our abilities and our humanity. Instead of, just, it could easily be going the other way. Things that just sort of sell things to us, right? That's kind of a big use case for tech. So it got really into the ethics side of things. So, I've done a number of things from help author exams and curriculum for college courses and technology ethics certifications and that kind of thing. Getting people excited about it, because there is a lot that we can do. And most recently, I worked with the World Economic Forum to author some governance principles for quantum computing development. Because again, maybe we weren't thinking about a lot of these things early on in classical computing, how to shape it and what some of the use cases might mean for us, right? In the 1960s, we didn't know that we'd all have smartphones. Right. But with quantum, we still don't know all of the use cases that are going to emerge. And same with AI, but we still have this ability to really shape it in a direction and to get ahead of it. And, both at sort of the individual contributor level, at the management level, if you're leading teams, and of course at the governance level. And that's the latest piece that we worked on, was advice for governments, universities, nonprofits. How do you think about quantum computing development? And how do you make it, one, accessible to people? How do you bring everybody into the fold? And this gets back to a lot of our conversation about women and diversity. How do you encourage people from all diverse backgrounds to get in and contribute to this thing? Because the more representation we have in that, the more it'll be shaped around everybody rather than a select few. How do we make sure that use cases are positive, that they push science forward, that maybe we can address sustainability as well. And then of course the cybersecurity and privacy piece is huge. On one hand, we have the known threat of quantum computing as it applies to data networks and data encryption. On the other side, we have quantum computers that are coming along, and they're going to be able to really intensely analyze data in a way that we're not familiar with. So how do we understand how to protect people and empower people with that data rather than the other way around?
Yeah, and that also kind of brings up questions, not only from an ethical point of view, but also from kind of more of almost like a human point of view. It's like, where do you draw the line? What makes something good and something, just kind of like hands off. And so I think having that kind of ethical perspective, if you will, when it comes to something, especially as big as quantum computing, no pun intended there. It seems like, having that kind of more human perspective, what the implications are to having this technology and what it's capable of doing and not doing, I think is so very important. And it really is kind of the next milestone, I think, in technology. We really need to bring a lot more kind of humanity into technology. Ethics, obviously, is a very large part of that conversation. And I don't think we're having enough of those conversations yet when it comes to ethics and understanding the implications of, privacy and how much information about you is out there and how people can use it and abuse it, and just we need to have some of those hard conversations, because right now they're not happening, and they're starting to kind of bubble up. But I wonder, do you think that's going to be kind of the next big conversation, if you will?
I really, really hope so. And to your point, it can get kind of hairy, right? So, where do you draw the line? Good, bad. And of course, maybe there is no line, right? It's all contextual. And so cybersecurity is one of the sort of low-hanging pieces of fruit, right? Data privacy is important. We can pretty much all agree on that. But
data privacy. No.
Data privacy. But you're right. In a lot of these exercises where I work with other people working on the ethics side, you get into a lot of kind of nuanced conversations. And I think the most important thing for me is, not necessarily the philosophical exercise, although I think that's very important, but just that people are talking about it and thinking about it, and it's on people's radar to sort of think, actually, when I'm building this thing, or when I'm architecting this thing, or when I'm using this thing, right? I'm using this service. I'm thinking of, it's in the back of my mind. I'm thinking about ethics. I'm thinking about my impact, or the impact of this thing, or, the impact this thing has on me. What does this mean for my data? What does this mean for the people who are using this? And so I think period, and I think the average person, we can just to some degree, we can short circuit all those debates and just say, if everyone's thinking about this, if everyone starts to think a little bit more deeply, and this is context that you go into technology with, that's a huge win. And I think you're right. I think this is more and more people are talking about this, even from 5 years ago. And I think it's going to be at the very, very forefront of how we move forward. And I do hope that, it doesn't take a big, huge data breach or, some event to make us really pay attention and talk about these things.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, I hope it doesn't take a very large event, although I will say that we are a stubborn species. And so I think it actually may take a big event before we actually do have the big conversations, because they're hard. I mean, these conversations are very hard to have, and they really kind of make you feel, you kind of have to bring your whole self into these conversations, right? And I don't think really people want to do that. I think people are, for the most part, they're very guarded about how they want to, how much they want to share, even though they share everything on Facebook. But, when it comes to actually their authentic self, I think people are very reticent to share that kind of information. And so, which is kind of ironic, considering the conversation they need to have has to be as authentic as possible.
It's a very human problem, for sure.
Yeah. So where do we go from here then?
Where do we go from here? Well, that's a great question. Getting ahead of it, I think, getting people talking. You're totally right. It's a hard conversation to have. We're often not incentivized to be authentic.
Right.
So, I think creating those spaces where it's okay. One thing that we've done at QSecure is be really intentional about culture and the culture that we promote. And we've even brought in consultants to kind of, as we grow and scale, how do we make sure that we're creating culture? And Google, I think, did this original study of what makes the most productive teams, and it's something I think they called psychological safety. So, to your point, how do you get people to feel secure in expressing what might be a controversial or not? We might all be thinking that an opinion we have is controversial, but it might also just be what everyone's secretly thinking. So I think, and I see this more and more, creating cultures, both in academia, in schools, in office spaces where we can talk about these things, and where it's from the top made a priority. One thing that I have been working on, because I head up product, is product management is more and more a really important role in technology companies. We've put together a sort of product management tool that's an ethical product management tool. So at the design phase, at the research phase, at the architecture phase, at the build and test phase, what can you start thinking about in terms of the product management checklist of, okay, here, we've considered this, we've considered this, we've considered this. Make it sort of easy to have that conversation.
That is cool. That is cool, because if you think about it, the regular kind of product roadmap, if you will, it's all about the technology. It's all about the user experience. It's all about this, but there's not that, what happens if this, kind of that, if this, then that kind of conversation about, the implications of, whatever. I love the fact that you guys are kind of building that into that. That is a nifty thing.
Yeah, make it easy.
I think we just kind of hyper focus too much on the technology itself. We don't actually think about, kind of the impact of that technology. And so there are situations in which, we're kind of getting blowback from that, kind of hyper focusing, but hopefully I love the fact that you consider yourself a technology ethicist. And I wonder if maybe this is a movement. Do you think we're going to have more technology ethicists in the mix?
I hope so. Yeah. I see more and more classes on it. So I think people are going to start thinking about it earlier. And I think, once we get to scale, then I'd love to bring some on the team dedicated to it. I think at least a little bit, we're going to see it more and more.
I wonder what the ranks will be of technology ethicists. I mean, the ratios of males to females. It seems like it's more of a kind of I don't want to call it a softer skill, but it certainly is less, I don't want to say technological, because that's totally untrue, but it seems like something more that a female would think more about than perhaps a male. And I know that's completely stereotyping, and I apologize for saying that, but there are certain things that females do tend to think about more than males do. And so the ethics of a technology, to me, in my mind, would be one of those things. So I wonder if, as the ranks do grow of technology ethicists, I wonder, who's actually going to be filling those ranks.
No, I totally hear what you're saying. I think, to be a technology ethicist and think about these things, empathy is a good superpower to have. And I think women can naturally bring that strength a lot of the time. And absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad I was thinking empathy. I didn't want to say it, but I'm glad you said it, because that's kind of the go-to feeling, if you will, or the go-to superpower. I love that word, superpower, for females. So great stuff. So what's on tap for your company?
Wow. So we've had a lot of really incredible advancements in the last couple months. So the President Biden in January and also in May released 2 separate executive memos saying, hey, government agencies, you need to make this upgrade to post-quantum cryptography. Essentially, all of our data, you need to make sure it's protected from quantum. There's a lot of kind of international dynamics at play here. And so national security is kind of very, very interested in making sure that things are, regular attack proof plus quantum proof. Mm-hmm. So that has sort of pushed forward our industry a ton. And so we've started to or continued to work really closely with those sectors. So a lot of government traction, and we'll be deploying there. And of course, it means for really highly regulated industries, especially those that do contract with the government, finance, et cetera, those industries are following suit. So it's a really exciting time to be working in this space. Mm-hmm. And I think things are just going to really grow really, really fast from here. We're already seeing it. No sleep for the weary. And yeah, I think so. Government's really getting on it, and I think we'll be seeing more and more of it in the news. And that's what I'm excited about.
Oh, well, that's great. And I think what you guys are doing is fascinating. And obviously you guys are in the sweet spot right now. Jennifer, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with me about, I'm sorry, not Jennifer. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Jennifer. I apologize. I'm going to say that again. 3, 2. Becca, I want to thank you for coming on and talking to me about your company, about your viewpoints, about the ethics in technology, and everything else. It has truly been a great, great conversation. And I think what you guys are doing is really great stuff. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Thank you for having me.
All right. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Tech Strong Women. We will be back with another Tech Strong Women very soon, but we'll also be back very soon with some more Tech Strong TV. So please stay tuned.
Hey everyone, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. First, on Tuesday, August 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, AWS and Sumo Logic are bringing you DevOps Institute's 2022 Global SRE Pulse Survey. This panel will bring answers to what practices SRE teams are adopting and the challenges they face. Next, on August 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern, DevOps.com is hosting a workshop titled Accelerate Software Delivery with Value Stream Mapping. Sponsored by ConnectAll, you'll leave this 90-minute workshop with tools you need to manage your value stream, improve the speed and quality of software development, and reduce costs. And finally, on August 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern, hosted on DevOps.com, Plutor is bringing you a program titled VSM, an ideal framework for continuous security dashboards. In this discussion, we're going to cover what continuous security is, and why you need visibility via a continuous security dashboard. So that's all I've got for you right now, but we have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back to KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. Mitch Ashley here with Razil.
Hi,
Habib,
yes.
CEO of CodeFresh. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm relieving
Happy
Alan here,
here,
so I got to get my rhythm going. Thanks for you're working with me here. So a developer conference, it just feels amazing to be walking around t-shirts and backpacks and talking code, right?
It feels great to be out again, to meet with partners, to meet with customers, to meet with leaders in our industry. So it is feeling great.
Man, I want to get out my JetBrains, IDE and start writing some code. Yeah, we'll see about that later. So, well, introduce yourself for folks that may not know you, and tell us a little bit about CodeFresh.
Sure. So my name is Razil, and I'm the CEO and founder of CodeFresh. And basically, our mission is to help organizations deploy software way more frequent than before. Almost every organization now, they always strive to deploy software frequently. CodeFresh, we enable them to do that. We're basically a GitOps company. I think as we all know, GitOps becoming the way of how to deploy software. So we help our customers implement GitOps on top of Argo CD. And yeah, it's been great so far with this event, really seeing how Argo is picking so much momentum in the market.
Interesting. I'm hearing GitOps more and more, and as a topic, I was at an analyst event for telco, and they were talking about edge computing and edge networking and GitOps and pop-up networks and declarative kind of infrastructure definition. So it's gaining some traction, and obviously good for you.
Yeah.
We're happy about that. What do you think it is about GitOps that is getting people's attention and why they're adopting it?
I think it reminds me the days where, we've all seen how everyone is moving from waterfall to agile. And basically the reasoning behind that movement was we need to release software way more frequent. We can't just deal. We can't just hold ourselves back with these like releases every year and a half or every few months. We have to move much faster. And GitOps is exactly along the very same lines. It's a deployment practice that allows organizations to deploy frequently, deploy multiple times a day. It takes away all this whole chaotic previous way of us deploying. Everything is stored in Git. You can roll back, you can see what the changes and so on. And it's part of this really kind of an ongoing transition that everything is stored in Git. Not just the application code, but also the infrastructure as a code, and now the application configuration as a code. So, and what's exciting in this event that we've actually seen, it's no longer kind of the practice of the cutting edge unicorn or startup of the world. It's really coming into mainstream. So our customers now are more and more Fortune 500 that they realize we made the first kind of decision to move into Kubernetes and cloud native technologies. The second question is like, okay, so now after we made that decision, how fast we can deploy to this infrastructure. And that's where practices like GitOps, open source projects like Argo comes into play.
Well, and I think it's part of taking some of the complexity out of all the things that we use, Kubernetes being a big part of it, of course, but the stack that we're using, and that changes constantly.
Yes.
Often I don't think about things as being in any state anymore. It's always fluid. It's always changing. Just assume it's under constant change. Exactly. You can't look at it at any one time and see the same thing twice. And that's the world we're in. I mean, imagine Fortune 500 that does some kind of business partnership with another company, and they want to open a new service and put it in Saudi Arabia and South America. And I'm not going to go provision data centers to go do that,
exactly.
right? And I'm not going to provision whole stacks. I want to be able to just say, this is what it looks like, go deploy it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the Fortune 500 companies across almost every industry, they realize that there's like new companies coming in that disrupting this industry with software. And if they will not make this shift to move as fast, they will basically lose their leadership in the market. They will lose their momentum. So, we had one of the very early insurtech companies and the company as a customer that came in, and now we've actually have traditional, big insurance firm in the US that say, okay, we can't just, stand back. We have to also see how we're moving fast. Same from, fintech companies, the medical companies, and so on. So, as Andreessen Horowitz, said that, software is eating the world. I think we are getting more and more like strong feel of how this is becoming. COVID to some level accelerated it when we really kind of invested a lot in technology to help us close a lot of the gaps of things that we couldn't do. But it's just this momentum continues, and across every industry, gaming industry, medical industry, fintech industry, they're all looking to see how we can deploy software more frequently, but again, just have it in a way that we're not compromising on quality. There is no chaos in our deployment and so on. And GitOps comes right into that niche to help them with streamlining these deployments and stay, organized, stay stable, stay with high quality, secure, and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're no longer chasing the killer app.
Yes.
Right? You never hear anybody talking about that anymore because
that's true.
What's an app today may not be one tomorrow, and we've got the next thing coming out a few days later, right? Tell us a little bit more about CodeFresh. I know you've had some announcements and made some really good progress here recently.
So we've been, in the market really helping our customers with deploying to Kubernetes. And more recently, we've kind of really focusing on helping them implementing GitOps, and beyond GitOps, progressive delivery. As you said, we're continually making changes. And as we continually making changes, one way to mitigate the risk of the changes is doing progressive delivery, like implement Canary or Blue-Green, in which we're just not changing the old version to the new one. We gradually expose it to our customers, and at any point of time, we run all of these checks to see that nothing goes wrong. What we've announced this event, which is really, really exciting for us, because Algo came up as, not really the leading technology. Leading technology for GitOps, the recent CNCF survey, Algo came up as one of the fastest growing projects. But with this announcement, we're actually making the usage of Argo CD, Argo rollout, and so on, so easy. In the same way that GitHub in the past did it for Git. You want to use Git, don't go and install it. You go in one click, you get this Git, just go to work.
Your account, you're ready to go.
We announced the same thing for Argo CD. You want to get Argo CD, you're getting up and running. Connect your cluster in a secure way and start deploying. You need multiple instances of Argo CD because you want to scale. And we spoke with some of our customers, Fortune 500, they have hundreds instances of Argo CD. You want to run 100 instances, you want to make sure that each cluster has its own dedicated for security reason. In one click, you get it up and running. You can integrate it with the rest of your ecosystem. You can have secret management. So we're super excited about it because we basically we really democratize the usage of Argo CD even more than it is now because it's a great technology already.
It's interesting, and you use the term progressive delivery. We usually hear about continuous delivery.
Yes.
Which is descriptive in itself, but I think I like progressive because that's how apps come out, right?
Yes.
Or more than just apps. All the infrastructure, all the code, all the software.
It is becoming, and it's on multiple layers. We're really talking now about the progressive delivery of, the code itself, of how we can start exposing the code to larger and larger, but gradually are part of our customers. But you can look at it in other layers. When we work with our partners, whether it's Split or Launch Darkly for feature flagging, it's a similar concept of I'm implementing the features, but I'm not immediately open it for everyone. I want to minimize the risk, so I open it to a subset of our customers, and then so we're working with them too. But it's customers are implementing this progressive delivery on each level of their application.
I don't know about Tesla and GitOps, but Tesla as a product is what I've described to people as progressive delivery, right? On all levels, because they may be upgrading the software that controls the motors, electric motors, the interface, what we see as an app on the dashboard, driving, whatever it might be. All of those things are on their own kind of path and frequency and feature rollout or upgrades or trials with a few customers. That progressive delivery, and it's a great model. I think people can relate to that. It is an ecosystem of software that is all happening in concert with each other.
And Tesla is just one example. We also have customers, large customers that have medical devices in hundreds of hospitals in the US, and their ability to gradually push these deployments to these remote devices and try it out in a subset in some hospitals, see how it works, and then roll it out to the rest of the hospitals. That's the future. It is exciting because that's the future. That's how everything is connected, and software is really driving how our life is getting more and more interesting and more easy and enjoyable and so on.
I know you had a packed session here. You were talking at a session, I believe at KubeCon.
We have Dan who on our team. We had a very, very busy sessions. I think most of them were around GitOps. We had a GitOps day here before the event starts, and that was the biggest GitOps we ever had. I think we're comparing that to the one we had in Los Angeles in the last KubeCon. This one was packed. You couldn't bring more people in. Also the sessions, the maintainer sessions for Argo CD. It reminds me when the open source project really becoming the standards. We've seen the traffic here, both in the CNCF Argo booth as well as at ours. So it is this event for us is really very strong reinforcement that our efforts in pushing this technology forward are really being receptive by the community, and the community want us to push it even more. We had launched end of last year certifications for Argo CD, really allowing you to get the basics and principles of Argo CD and GitOps. It's been a few months. We have over 8,000, certified developers that wanted to learn about, Argo CD. There's certain companies that make this certification kind of mandatory as part of the onboarding of their employees, because that's the new way of deploying software.
That's exciting times. It's great to talk with you. Congratulations on a
successful
show. Thanks for joining us. We got more interviews coming up. Be sure and check out CodeFresh. Is it .io or .com?
CodeFresh.io.
Yeah, I thought so. .io. So be sure to check that out.
Thank you so much.
More interviews coming up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a few.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Perk Stozic, who is engineering manager for open source collection at Sumo Logic, and we're talking about all things related to open telemetry. Perk, welcome to the show.
Hey Mike, nice to meet you.
I think people have it in their heads that somehow or other open telemetry is one uber thing when it's actually a bunch of different things that all are being developed under the common framework. So can you walk people through a little bit of what exactly is in open telemetry as it applies to logs and traces, and how does the whole thing manifest itself?
Open telemetry is a big project actually, and it consists of a couple of things. So it's not going to be an easy answer, but it's not that complicated either. So there are, to me personally, there are like three biggest things here. First of all, there is specification for all the things about the open telemetry. Those are guidelines for the APIs, for the SDKs. There are like semantic conventions, all the important stuff about how do you want to model the data, how do we want to model the API. Then there are those SDKs as implemented into the languages, into the frameworks, so that you can actually use those APIs from within your language, like Java or Scala or Ruby. And then there's this third part, which is a collector itself. So not only you can create the data using the instrumentation libraries, this data has the same specification. You can also collect the data, process it, and send them to the vendor of your choice.
Now, you guys have your own distribution of that. So is that how we're going to see this manifested? There'll be multiple distributions, or how does this come together in a way that's consumable for the average DevOps team?
I believe that many vendors will provide their own distributions, and the important fact about them is that those distributions are not forks, in a way that when you have a Linux distribution, it doesn't mean that you provide your own Linux kernel. Sometimes you just do some patches, but the distribution itself is like you package many components, and you say, hey, I am going to support those components in those versions. So actually, this is the same thing that happens here. As a Sumo, what we do is we use the community version of the components. We add some components that we actually created, and then we package that and say to our customers that, hey, this is something that we as a Sumo support, and customers, should they have any questions, any problems, we are there to take and help with that. I believe that this will be tough for many vendors, because it's not like you can support all of the components that are out there in the upstream community, because there's a lot of there. And right now, we can support our vendor specific exporter, for example, but we cannot say that we can fully support exporters for the other vendors. So that's why we just pick some components and we say that, hey guys, this is our area.
There also seems to be some confusion as to what degree all of this is ready for prime time. Some folks will say the agents are still fairly large compared to proprietary agents. Others will say it's harder to install than proprietary agents. So what is your sense of where are we on this journey and how far do we have to go?
I would say that it is pretty fair to say that it is harder to install than other agents, for example, because right now this is mostly put somewhere on the GitHub as a RPM dep or just a single binary for you to download. But I believe that will be there at some point. So it shouldn't be that hard actually at some point, because when the adoption gets bigger, obviously it will be easier to install the stuff. But then when it comes to the being production ready, so to speak, that is fair as well. Like OpenTelemetry says that traces or metrics are actually stable and logs are not. And that means that the API for the metrics and traces are stable, for logs is not. But what we found at Sumo when we use our own distro is that we started quite recently dogfooding this as much as possible. And right now I can tell you that we have mixed loads. We use both Kubernetes and the non-Kubernetes. And for the Kubernetes workloads, when we dogfood our own stuff, our own Kubernetes collection machinery, we use OpenTelemetry at full, and we don't see that many problems. There are some from time to time, and we are able to fix them quite fast. We have a very good connection with the upstream community, so whenever we find a problem, we just fix it, and it's actually delivered. And it is working, I must say. It is working, and for us, it's working brilliantly.
What is your sense of how pervasive will we start instrumenting applications? If I look back in time, APMs were not widely used because it cost money to buy the agent, install it into the application. Somebody had to actually go do that, and it became something you used, on a limited basis. Are we on the cusp of seeing pervasive instrumentation of applications, and how long might that take?
There's a couple of projects in the area. For example, there are a lot of projects around the auto instrumentation. For example, on Kubernetes, you just install your instrumentation operator for the OpenTelemetry, and it is able to inject the instrumentation libraries into your projects, but it's not there for every language. So there is some stuff to be done, and this is like ongoing journey. Obviously, you can manually instrument your applications, but as you said, this makes a hard time for some customers. It's not easy, and especially sometimes you just don't have control over the application that you run, because maybe you just bought it from somewhere, you have no idea what's the source code, and you don't have access to the source code in the first place. There's one very interesting project around that in the area that is trying to tap into the eBPF, so that maybe you don't need to instrument your application. You will get all of the information from the layer that is below that, from the kernel itself. But then there's this question, how good this data will be for you, because this is like a very, very technical instrumentation, I would say. This is like function calls. You're not always interested in this kind of an instrumentation. It will be rather more interesting to you if you get the business domain instrumentation. Like if you get the information, like let's say you use the Ruby on Rails framework and you have instrumentation created specifically for that, then you will get information about all of the calls that make sense in the Ruby on Rails domain, and not about every function call that is actually being made out there.
as we go along, it seems to me at least that a lot's riding on all this, because we're talking about observability, but we can't really have observability unless we really instrument everything, and we can have it to a degree. And even further down the road, all these AI ops platforms are dependent upon being able to collect data from everywhere. And so is it your sense that maybe we're a little over our skis, as they say, when it comes to observability and AI ops, simply because we have not instrumented everything to the nth degree yet? And this is going to be an extended journey.
I believe it will be, yes, at this point. But then there's this promise for the OpenTelemetry, and the vendor support is actually very, very good here, and the community is very growing. And then if you see like what is the what are the projects that are most popular from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, then OpenTelemetry is the second, just after the Kubernetes. So there is a lot of stuff going on here, and I am pretty sure that it will be up to speed. I mean, it is right now up to speed, but it's not there yet. I think that it will be there in not that long time.
What's your best advice first on how should I go about using OpenTelemetry? Where should I start? Are there small projects I should start with today? Or are there particular use cases? Where are you seeing the most interest or success?
If you'd like to start with the OpenTelemetry and you just have your project and don't know what to do, I would advocate just go to the OpenTelemetry website first, because the documentation there is amazing, and there are examples. There is a lot of like tons of information, and it is actually a useful information. So that is awesome. And then that depends what is your use case, whether you want to create the data in the first place, whether you your application already creates logs, metrics, maybe traces, and that you just want to take this data and just push them to the vendor, maybe process them in the meantime, because that is what actually collector is doing. I think that this is a very big strength of it, is that not only it can collect and export data, but it can also process it in the same way. Whether there is logs, metrics, or traces, there is a lot of processors that takes care of for all of three of them. So you don't have to have like different configuration for those. But maybe you want to do it differently. Maybe you just want to use a library to create the data in the first place and skip, because you can do that. You can skip the collector altogether. You can just send directly from the library through the OTLP protocol, which is a native OpenTelemetry protocol, to send the telemetry data. All three signals, logs, metrics, and traces. Then I would advise as well to go to the documentation, see what is the current status for your language, and there are informations how to tap it into your project, how to use that, and so on.
What about folks that want to either contribute to the project or help support it in some ways? How do they get involved?
Oh, there's tons of meetings around that, and as I said, there's the vendor support is amazing, but also people involved in that community are passionate about that work. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and if you're interested in contributing, that is awesome. Then you can join the Slack, which is hosted by this Slack thread, which is hosted by this CNCF. Actually, a couple of Slack threads, or you can go to the GitHub. You can join the SIG meetings that are there, the special interest groups meetings. Every day there's like 4 or 5 different SIG meetings for different topics. That is like for collector is one, for logs is one, for the specification is another. You just pick your topic of your interest, and you can join the SIG and start contributing there. You can, at the very least, go to the GitHub and see where you would like to help, and like see what are the problems. There are issues which are which have this like good first issue label, and you can just pick them, start working on them. You can start with reviewing stuff, or just start with reviewing the documentation. Maybe the documentation is not good. So when you read and you see that something is awkward or maybe not explained enough, you can just fix it. Community is very community likes contributions, so to speak, and there's a lot of contributions. So also there's no problem with contributing stuff. I think right now within the community, I've been to the OpenTelemetry community day a month ago, and I've heard from the maintainers that the biggest problem actually for them is that it's not like they don't have contributions. It's rather that they don't have time to review all of this stuff because there's so many contributions. So if you think like maybe you're not so good with implementing and with code, but you can review stuff, then reviewing PRs, reviewing issues is a very, very good place to start, I would say.
All right. Do you think ultimately, we've been talking about observability as a core tenet of DevOps forever and a day, but for the most part, that's been kind of continuous monitoring at best. Do you think we're on the cusp of some new era here in terms of DevOps and observability, and that we may start to be able to do things we never imagined?
I would say yes, and the reason for that is that, and this is very cool about the OpenTelemetry project in the first place, is that because it started with the specification, and you have the same specifications for logs, for metrics, for traces, and it goes from the instrumentation through the collector to the vendor. At some point, you probably will have this data in the same schema in a multiple vendors, for example. So there will be this opportunity, for example, for vendors to communicate with each other. Maybe one vendor is good with one thing, another vendor is good with another thing. So maybe you can mix them together. Also, this is actually easier for vendors, I would say, because right now, I would say that everybody was just a little bit reinventing the wheel for themselves. And then you have different schema here, different schema there. Everybody was working on the same stuff. Right now, you could actually adopt OpenTelemetry and don't reinvent the wheel and just focus on the stuff that matters for customers, which is I want to just observe my application. So not focus on the technical things, but then focus rather on how to use OpenTelemetry to make your user successful, so that they can see whether their applications and their infrastructure is working or not.
All
so
right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Hey, Perk, thanks for sharing your knowledge and insights. That was awesome.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for letting me speak here.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dan Larunk, who is the CEO for ChainGuard, and we're talking about the Cyber Review Board has a new report out talking about the Log4j vulnerability. They're kind of like, the people from the government who come around and examine the cause of accidents and why did the plane crash or the train crash, and it's a similar idea. And now they're starting to look into some of the major incidents and vulnerabilities. So Dan, you looked at this report. What can we learn?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. This is like the people, coming in after, a real bad infrastructure failure and trying to figure out the root causes and write up a report and recommendations for both what happened, kind of the factual statements, as well as what we should do going forward. The factual stuff here is not to be kind of glossed over. There's a lot of confusion. The week Log4j happened and the patches were coming out and nobody was unsure of exactly which versions were affected and all of that. So I found the timeline part at the start of this really, really useful. Just kind of seeing it all laid out in the right order now that we've had a couple months to look back on it. I also found the recommendations really useful because this, like you said, is a government kind of report. And so it gets to include recommendations that are a little hard to do from a company. And it gets to include stuff that the government can do, which is a slightly different set of tools.
Mm-hmm. Is it your sense that a lot of the instances of Log4j are actually vulnerable, or is it just that we use it so much that everybody kind of panicked. But when you get into it, not a lot of it was actually externally facing and maybe accessible, but we learned some lessons. Or what's your sense of just how big an issue was this looking back at it with some 2020 hindsight?
No, this is really a perfect storm of an issue. Pretty much all of the instances were vulnerable, and we use a lot of it, and it was running almost everywhere. I think the report found that attackers didn't actually get an opportunity to use this too much in real-world compromises. And I think I'd preface that, or I'd suffix that with a yet. This is one of those where everybody paying attention kind of didn't get much of a weekend that week, and it even stretched out into the following week. All the people kind of running secure systems responsibly were on top of this. They did a really good job shutting systems down, patching them, and getting stuff rolled out. But the other analogy they made in that report is they call this an endemic vulnerability. That means it's one we're going to be living with forever. There's this long tail of shadow IT, of systems running that people don't even realize are running. And Log4j is going to enter every attacker's toolkit from now on whenever you're trying to get into a compromised system. Just check to see if you can find any Log4j still sitting somewhere. I mean, we're going to see some really embarrassing breaches probably in the next couple of years is my prediction.
And to that point, some folks I talk to are still looking for their instances of Log4j. They kind of know that they're out there, but they don't know exactly where or how they were used. So what makes this so challenging and pernicious?
That's it right there. In Java, the Java ecosystem, Log4j, are used everywhere. And a lot of these systems don't get rebooted often, right? These are, mission critical systems that are left running and supporting, critical workloads. And we have a tendency to forget about those in this industry. This was even used on the Mars rover. That's how wide reaching this vulnerability was. And so, this has been pulled into the type of systems that, don't get weekly patches, that don't have somebody standing at the keyboard making changes to them constantly. So that's the reason it's going to be so widespread and so long term.
Okay, a ransomware attack on the Mars rover might be at the very least interesting to see how that would be patched, but we'll see how that might go.
Yeah.
When you think about all this, it also seems like we learned a couple of lessons about what's possible with open source software security in general. So do you think that we're moving forward with that in the right direction from here? There's been a few reports from the community itself, but I mean, the truth of the matter is a lot of these projects are run by a handful of people. They don't have really all the time in the world to patch everything and to respond to every vulnerability. It might take them some time to get to do that. So is there some other way of thinking about all this?
No, these are the right questions to be asking. And, I think this is an example of where Log4j was a huge success for the industry, right? This library was maintained. It was maintained by people on a volunteer basis, but it did have professional maintainers that were capable of dealing with security fixes around. I've seen much less severe vulnerabilities and much less widely used applications, but I've seen similar ones where the maintainers weren't there anymore. A library had been abandoned, and the rollout process and the patch process gets much more complicated in that case. If you don't have somebody that you can reach within a couple hours or a day that still has access to push code to the repository to apply a patch. It turns into a much bigger mess as people scramble to figure out how long they should wait for somebody to appear, when to actually do that first fork, how to coordinate the community moving over to that fork, which fork to use in the case everybody panics and you get multiple with incompatible fixes. And then eventually, how do you merge all those back together and who's going to maintain this thing in the long term? So I think this is an example where Log4j was a huge win, where we got very lucky and those maintainers were doing a great job and were able to get that patch rolled out. I think there's an alternate history you could play out where they weren't around and they weren't able to do that. And, it would have been weeks or months rather than days to a week. But it did start a bunch of, really interesting conversations about open source that you kind of just touched on here too.
Do you think enterprise organizations may be a little more circumspect about what open source they're using because of this issue, and now they're asking questions that they previously might not have asked at all?
I think they should be. I think they need to be, right? Open source is everywhere now, right? This isn't the 90s. This isn't the early 2000s when it was really a fight between open and proprietary software. Open source is one, and I think enterprises over the last decade or so have had it too easy. They've been using open source. They've been taking open source. There's arguments about whether they should give back, how much to give back, where to give back. But I think the bigger question is the one you just touched on about, what happens when it does break, and should they be paying attention to what they're using? And should they have a plan for what to do if a vulnerability like this is found? And I think, it's impossible to go say open source should change. Open source is no one person, it's no one community, it's no one code base. That doesn't really make any sense. But the way enterprises use open source has to change. And I think, this was another wake-up call. We had seen them in the past with, Apache Struts or Heartbleed or some of these other really widely used pieces of critical infrastructure. And I think, there's only so many more of these that we can handle before something bad does happen to an industry. So I hope this is a time where people actually start reevaluating this and figuring out the right way to use it responsibly.
And the phrase give back, when a lot of C-level folks hear that, they're like, well, I don't have coders who are going to write code and contribute all that stuff. However, there's a lot of other ways to give back, whether it's financial commitments or just helping to review code, or for that matter, working on the documentation. So do you think people really understand what it means to give back?
Yeah, there's no one way to give back, right? And I think that that makes it pretty hard. Some projects, are set up to take funding, and if you give them a couple dollars here and there, they can make use of it. Others aren't, right? Just the overhead to set up funding and being able to take it, especially if you do have another day job or something, and you're working on this for fun on the weekends, can be hard, right? Money isn't the only answer. Setting patches. Sometimes people aren't interested in that either, right? There's no one way to do open source, and sometimes these maintainers release code and don't want anybody to bother them about it again. So there's no one right answer here. I think, being conscious about it, being willing to help out where you can, documentation updates, tutorials, all of that can be useful.
The other thing that seems to occur is that people will take open source code and then they'll add something to it, and they kind of created their own little fork, but they don't give back the thing that they added to it to the community. And then eventually, we hope that the forks will come together at some future date, but ultimately, too often my forks have forks. So is there another way of thinking about this?
No, I mean, that's covered in the licensing, right? When to fork, what you're allowed to do, what changes you're allowed to make, when you have to share stuff back, right? And, that's rarely the problem here, right? Organizations taking code, applying their own patches, and refusing to give those back. I've seen that happen, and that comes with a lot of pain too, right? Inside of the organization, because you've got to keep those patches up to date as you try to bring in new ones, right? It's almost always easier in the long run to get your patches upstream, because then, it gets maintained with the rest of the process. You're not constantly rebasing, merging, resolving merge conflicts, that crazy headache on a fast-moving project. That said, that is the best method in a lot of cases, right? And it can actually reduce the overhead on maintainers. If you've got some niche feature and you want to run this code on a platform that nobody else cares about, adding that upstream is really just going to add a maintenance burden to everybody else working on the program. And sometimes that is the simplest and most friendly way to add a feature that you care about to an open source project.
All right. You were king of the open source community for a day. What's the one thing you wish you could fix, or what's the one thing that you wish would be changed or that would make everybody's life better?
King of the open source community, man. This is like bringing order to chaos and anarchy. I can't even imagine that. Oh, man. I think, and again, this is like a selfish take on, what I think would help everybody more responsibly use open source and make better decisions, is if everybody would add a kind of statement in some kind of text explaining their expectations for the project, right? Licenses only go so far, right? They say, this comes with no liability, no warranty. But a lot of people do try to fix bugs in a responsible time and have a security policy and want to encourage contributions. People that go the other way aren't doing anything wrong, but I think it would be a lot easier for people to collaborate and have productive discussions if you stated your expectations for yourself, for the code, what type of things you were looking for, and actually updated that, when situations change, which is a lot to ask. You might start out with the intention of maintaining something forever and then get a new job. If something changes in your family, you run out of time. But clearly stating, kind of what you're looking to get out of the project, I think would help everybody make better decisions.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. We all learned a lot, and hopefully nobody got hurt in the process, so we can move on from here, and things will be better as we go forward. The more we know, the better off we are. Dan, thanks for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, back here live at RSA. It's Wednesday, day 3 of RSA week. It's got to be getting close to 4 o'clock because I see the crowd streaming in here to Moscone West. I think there's a 3:55 keynote. down there. So more people. You know, Moscone West is definitely a little quieter than Moscone North and South, where the expo is. It's a little crazy there. It's about 25,000 people here, they say. So we'll see. Anyway, my guest for this segment is Ian Hutchinson. Ian is with Duplo Cloud, a DevOps as a service company. What are they doing at RSA, you ask? Well, we're going to jump into that right now. Hey, Ian, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
Good to have you here. So, look, we're probably uniquely situated to do this interview, being as we are DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. But let's not everyone out here has probably heard of Duplo Cloud. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, Duplo Cloud was founded in 2018, Series A funded company that we announced about 4 months ago. DevOps as a service is what we do. Most of the organizations that use us lean to us for all things security and compliance in the context of cloud infrastructure. So these organizations are on AWS, Azure, and GCP.
Yep.
And the talent gap on the security side is something that we think a lot about. And we've taken a low-code, no-code approach to infrastructure and infrastructure provisioning to help ensure security and compliance.
Absolutely. I think the security gap is not just in the cloud, it's through and through, but that's a whole nother interview. So, Ian, DevOps is a service. When I started DevOps.com in 2013, we published 2014. There were a lot of people that were trying to run DevOps as a service because DevOps was hard. Much as people today run Kube as a service and stuff, because Kube is hard. One of the issues, though, is everybody wanted to jump on the bandwagon, and everyone was extending the definition of DevOps as a service to suit their own particular flavor of it, right? When you say DevOps as a service, what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it, and the problem manifests itself at different layers. There's the networking layer, there's all of the cloud services that are growing every day. There's app provisioning with the advent of Kubernetes, serverless, so on and so forth. There's all the diagnostics tools that developers are using. There's CI/CD, and then there's security and compliance across the board. Mm-hmm. So when I think of DevOps as a service, I'm thinking about all the tasks that an individual, it may be a developer in an organization that is very sort of developer self-service oriented, where they're changing the environment that they're working in, where they're looking at those diagnostics, they're looking at those metrics.
Sure.
I'm thinking about all of the security controls. Like half of the work tends to come down to security, which is sort of the counterpoint to self-service. At a lot of companies, it's either the developer is too constricted and can't do what they want for security and compliance reasons, which are valid, or the everything's open, which has a different problem.
A whole different set of problems. So let's examine this a little bit. So it sounds to me like in your DevOps as a service scenario, it's really helping a lot of devs with if we can say, the ops end of the house, right? And in DevOps, quite frankly, there is a lot thrown on the dev, and they need help with the ops, and they need help with the security. With my and I've obviously been doing DevOps a long time. I'm doing security 25 years. My personal experience and thought process is, it's not that developers don't want to do security, or that they don't want to. No one says, I want to develop insecure code, right? They want.
Agreed.
The problem is they often, don't understand the reasoning, the rhyme or reason to a lot of security, schemas. And then B, the tools they're given to use are not really geared to them. They're geared to security people who are doing that full time and have a whole different mindset. And that, nature abhors a vacuum. And that, I think, created those two kinds of things created the great opportunity for Duplo Cloud.
Yeah. And I think you're thinking about it the right way. I mean, even an individual that's been in security for 25 years will walk around the expo hall here at RSA and be surprised at you look at some of the vendors and you're like, okay, and that's different than this. How? There's just a lot of depth. Same goes in the cloud world.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton of depth, whether you're AWS, Azure, GCP, or on-prem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some organizations and the cloud partners specifically are looking to address the problem through education, which I think is an important part of the approach. But I think doing what we can for the developers is another area, because we can't count on them all to be security and infrastructure experts. So we got to make it easier for them.
Agreed. The real problem I have is, do you ever foresee a time where we will have enough security and infrastructure experts? I don't.
No, I don't. I don't. And
that's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I think when I look at like a typical engineering team or development team, where they have dedicated infrastructure specialists and dedicated security specialists, I think I get a little bit bummed at the ratio of resources that are focused and spending time on that. And it's not a win for anyone, because the whole DevOps movement, the developers were, felt bottlenecked.
Yeah.
And I don't think the answer is isolation and talking about these roles in silos.
No.
I think the answer is leveling up everyone. And I mean, specifically on the infrastructure side, not looking at any of the application vulnerabilities, application security, specifically on infrastructure, right? There are only a finite number of ways of configuring and provisioning infrastructure. It is a solvable problem.
Well, look, when I first, again, 2013, DevOps to a lot of people back then meant Chef, Puppet, or Ansible, which was supposed to solve that.
They were the pioneers.
You had your golden ticket, right? Your golden lineup. And boom, every single instance I spun up was going to be exactly the same to my golden specification, right? It didn't work like that, as much as we thought it would.
I mean, containers, Kubernetes, the world has changed.
Well, but containers and Kubernetes killed Chef and Puppet and the Radio Star, but it still gave you that same ability to just, immutable infrastructure to spin up containers that were clones of the ones before. It shouldn't be that hard, but it is that hard, and it doesn't work the way I think a lot of people were hoping and thinking it would. The second piece of it is this, though, and this is someone who's a DevOps fan, right? I love DevOps, but the fact of the matter is, for a lot of organizations, DevOps became put more on the developer's plate, right? And the developers already had a full plate. We've seen the rise of SRE and these folks who are, doing more of the ops stuff, working with developers, trying to break down these silos and all of that stuff. But again, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but there's probably a minority of organizations that do that well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those that do it well, we talked about decentralizing the role. We talked about giving people what they need in order to be successful. I think fundamentally the DevOps role goes away.
Some will tell you there was never such a thing as a DevOps role or a DevOps engineer.
Yeah, you do a career search and find the 120,000 open roles.
Well, exactly.
You're sort of
then you say, "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" Go ahead.
I think the good companies have that role integrated with their developers, working with them day to day. The great companies have eliminated that role altogether, and are looking at automation in order to continue putting that in place. Drupal Cloud, fundamentally, when we have these conversations with mature companies that are advanced in this journey, it comes down to the security and compliance gap is the number one reason that, okay, we've automated all this, it's working. We're making deployments regularly. We've got rolling deploys, we can fix issues, so on and so forth. We've got our infrastructure as code, we've got our CI/CD. They're content. But then all of a sudden they're selling to a public sector entity, and they need to take a whole new look at how they've approached security and compliance. Right. And then we look to repeat it all, but with that level of security and compliance in place.
Now, the fact that you're even offering this and doing this as a business model means that you obviously have that security and compliance expertise in-house that you are providing to your customers. I got to imagine that in itself is a hard number to fill.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, Duplo Cloud was founded to solve the DevOps problem. We took a look at it, and then we started looking at the compliance standards, PCI, NIST, the frameworks, and what they were asking for, and said, you know what? If we're going to automate this, let's automate it in a way that really makes sense based on the security and compliance frameworks. And then I think that gave us a level of focus and an area where we could start with an application-centric perspective and do this over and over and over again with different organizations in a low-code, no-code way.
Got it. We've hit on a bunch of different things here, but you know what we didn't hit on? For people who want to get information on Duplo Cloud, what's the web address?
Yeah, duplocloud.com.
So it's DUPLO?
Yeah. Cloud.
Reading it off your shirt, I'm cheating. I'm sorry.
You're checking me out.
No, it wasn't. I would just make sure I spelled it right.
Yeah, duplocloud.com. I mean, there's a platform demo that goes in depth. It talks about the no-code approach. It talks about the Terraform provider. There's a mapping to HIPAA, to PCI, control by control.
Cool.
There's, I mean, when you're working with developers, you try and make it as easy as possible on them, and it's an area we're continuing to get better at.
So I got to ask you a question.
Sure.
And as someone who's has many years in security and more than a couple now in DevOps, you seem like there's a little bit of a kindred spirit there, where you started out all about DevOps, right, and providing DevOps as a service, and kind of was seduced by the dark side of security and compliance, recognizing that that's your customer's biggest area of need. And really the company is now sort of, rallied around that as that's the main thrust of it.
Yeah, I mean, your question in there is around like how do we think about?
I mean, is that when you look back on it, is that wasn't the plan all along? I got to guess.
I mean, fundamentally, we were focused on how dev teams operate. We were focused on our customers, right? Those early champions and advocates that we were working with. And when they were getting their first, big customers who were asking them all sorts of questions that they were having a tough time answering, they were looking to us to guide them. So the product fundamentally didn't change. It was just enabling the customers to enforce the policies, the controls that they needed to be where they are.
Got it.
And then helping them communicate it to their customers, because ultimately that was the biggest thing. And it's to the point now where if you ask, a CTO of one of our customers why they bought Duplo Cloud, they will say, security and compliance. Absolutely, they remember. If you ask a developer, they'll say, what's security and compliance? Right?
And that's a beautiful thing if that's it, because if you could not obscure it, but if you could bury it that deep where it's just a tool that's helping them, they don't think of it as a security and compliance tool. You did a good job.
Yeah, and I think it frees up bandwidth to focus on application security, to focus on
other
CSE,
aspects,
focus on QA,
Sure.
focus on. I mean, work's not going away.
No, and there's always too much of it, right?
Yeah.
Ian, thanks for joining us, man.
Appreciate the
I
time.
know you were worried about having enough content. We could have spoke for another hour if we want.
Absolutely, anytime.
Go check out Duplo Cloud. DevOps as a service, security and compliance. We're live at RSA. We're going to be right back.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back here live. Day 2, Valencia, KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. It's getting later in the day, and I don't know what they're giving away here, but we've got a line of people. Oh, it's a book signing. That's great. It's hopping. I haven't been around, as I said earlier, we haven't been around this many people live in a long time. It took a little getting used to.
Yes.
I was at first a little taken back. Anyway, let me introduce you to our next guest. His name is, I'm going to hopefully get this right, Uma Makata. Close?
Yes, almost. Uma Mokara.
Uma Mokara. There's no T in there? Right, there is no T in there. That's why I keep the name here. Uma is head of chaos engineering at Harness, but he actually comes to Harness as part of the acquisition or bringing in of the Litmus Chaos.
That's right.
Team, which is an open source project managed and part of the CNCF. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
And then Uma is also a maintainer still right now of the Litmus project at CNCF.
That's correct.
Okay. Now that we got that out of the way, the rest is on you, Uma.
Sure.
Talk to our audience. We spoke to Harness, Nick from Harness earlier. He mentioned it. But tell us what's Litmus? What's Litmus Chaos? Why is it so popular?
Yeah. So think of it. Thanks for having me here. Litmus Chaos is a tool for cloud-native developers and SREs, using which you can practice chaos engineering in a very easy and scalable manner. Cloud native has been very helpful for transitioning into the new digital transformation. And while Kubernetes is so popular, you need a tool to help you verify that everything is going right while you make the transition onto cloud native. So the DevOps is also transforming into what I call as cloud native DevOps. And you need certain tool set which help you verify what you're doing is right even when some failures happen, right? So that's been known as chaos engineering. Try to break things in production or on purpose. If something can fail, they will fail. That's Murphy's Law, right? So you need a way to verify that my code, my application, my service is going to work well when something fails. So that's primarily the genesis of what Litmus is. And I wanted to have a tool that works just like how other cloud native tools work. What I mean by that is you need to be able to write in a cloud native language, in a declarative language. So define your idea in a totally declarative fashion. So in other words, we are trying to do chaos as code or experiments as code. So we've been doing it quite well. The community has been extremely helpful. They're giving feedback. And we recently became a CNCF incubating project. Lots of users at KubeCon, lots of feedback. We had a great session here. We're looking forward to continue to working with community, take more feedback, build more experiments.
Absolutely. Uma, if you don't mind, share a little bit with the audience of your background. How did you come to create Litmus?
Well, my background has been, I'm a technologist. For the last 10 years, I've been trying to build some innovative solutions. Chaos Native was my third company. So when I was doing my second gig at Maya Data, I was really trying to make a product sale of a storage-based solution. And the end customer basically asked, well, we are making a big step of deploying your cloud-native solution and prove me that it works when there are failures, right? So basically, that's when I started looking at chaos engineering, and then I didn't find a great and easy to use solution. At that time, this is back in 2017. So I started writing a tool, being the technologist I am. I just paired up with a few people in the team. Hey, let's write some simple chaos tool to test our own solution. And for no reason, we just open sourced it, and it was taken extremely well by the open source community. It was in one of the KubeCons. So yeah, then I realized it's not just me that's looking for chaos tool. but a lot of other people too. So, it started really from there. But yeah, basically, you think of me as a technology innovator in this space right now. So it's all about listening to people, what chaos tests they want, what are the new use cases, and putting them back into the project and try to create an enterprise solution around it too.
Love it. That's a great story. So did you do, or are you doing like an update here?
Yes. So
session? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to share one update in KubeCon. So basically Litmus, we started with, have a tool that's super easy to use and build it correctly for the cloud native. So we started building chaos operators and chaos ERDs. That was our first milestone. The second milestone is really how can we extend chaos to a larger team, right? So it should be more collaborative. That was Litmus 2.0. And now recently we built capabilities where Litmus can be used easily in pipelines or by developers, right? So we just wrote a blog on Litmus being ready for chaos by developers. So it's a matter of creating your test, push it into your single source of truth, maybe GitHub or GitLab or any other Git, and then insert that test into your pipeline or into your regular test. And then it gets picked up by Kubernetes operators, you run, and then the results are shown back in your chaos center. So it's a nice and easy ecosystem for either developers or QA or SREs to pick up something that's a declarative, a chaos test, and then run it wherever you want and use it in a way that you want it.
Excellent. So look, Harness's website we know is harness.io. Is there still the Litmus project? What's the website for that?
Litmus continues to be there. Earlier, Chaos Native was sponsoring. Now Chaos Native is acquired by Harness. So Litmus will be continue to be sponsored by Harness, and we will continue to be.
No, I meant it like at the website. If someone wanted to go get more information on Litmus.
LitmusChaos.io. That's an open source.
LitmusChaos.io.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted people to know. Of course, they could probably get it through CNCF eventually. It's on GitLab. GitHub.
GitHub. Yeah. So github.com/litmuschaos/litmus is our code repository, and litmuschaos.io is our website. And you should also look at the Chaos Hub, where we store all the generally available chaos experiments. It's hub.litmuschaos.io.
Love it. Hey man, I want to thank you for stopping by amid all of this chaos and telling us about Litmus Chaos. Good luck with Harness. Everyone from Jody on down there are great people. So
it's a great company. I've been loving it. It's a good fit for me, to be part of the DevOps, modern DevOps ecosystem. Yeah, I think we are looking at creating more innovation in chaos. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations. All right, we've got one more interview. I'm gonna sign off here from KubeCon. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
All right.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. Our hosts met with some stellar guests from around the world to discuss the hottest topics in the tech industry. From RSA to KubeCon Cloud NativeCon to another great episode of Techstrong Women, this show was action-packed to say the least. We'll be back again tomorrow with a full slate of content, so be sure to join us for that. Once again, thanks for watching and we hope to see you again. Stay strong, Techstrong.